In the year 2000, Midway Games released its last arcade game, entitled The Grid. And little did I know, upon stumbling upon this game in the year 2001, it would change my life forever. You see, The Grid to me is more than just a game. It became a lifestyle, a sense of community, a sense of family. And clearly, if you've been following me over the last 9 years of my life, you would see what a strong impact that this game has on me. And people always ask me questions all the time regarding the game. The main one being, what is the game? What is The Grid? I've never heard of it. The other question is, where did you get all these machines? And the other one that's most important is, why are you doing this? So, to answer all your questions, that's why we're here today. To bring in my first solo episode on the Sauce Talk podcast, I'm going to take this time to, in detail, fully explain exactly why I do what I do and what The Grid is. So please, enjoy the ride as I sit here and take a deep dive in what I call The Grid and me. You're now listening to the Sauce Talk podcast. What up, everybody? It's your boy Al Siggity Sauce, and welcome back to the Sauce Talk podcast. Today, this is my first solo episode, and I decided that if I'm going to do some solo episodes and I'm going to start interweaving them rather into my Sauce Talk podcast timeline, I got to start off with a banger. Now, if you've been following me on social media, as I mentioned in my intro, I've been doing this for 9 years now, fully entrenched in The Grid. It absolutely consumed me. I've been throwing parties every month, the whole nine. If you've been following me across, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And people are always asking me questions. Obviously, the main one is, what is The Grid? I never heard of it because it's such a rare arcade game. And why do you do this? And where did you get all these machines? So I'm like, you know what? Every time people ask me that, they're at my house and I don't have enough time because I don't know how to talk in small form. I'm a long format speaker. So, and I have a high attention to detail. So I figured, you know what? Let me just make my first solo episode to explain exactly what my obsession is, how it even came to be, and the whole nine. So that's why we're here today. And to be honest, I'm kind of excited to talk about this. And, I can't really talk about The Grid without talking about my love for video games as a whole and how this whole thing actually started. So I was born in 1986. I'm 39 years old now. And, I was always into video games. My mom always took care of me. She always made sure I had everything. I'm an only child, so I was always blessed, thank God, thank the good Lord, with whatever I wanted to a degree. But I wasn't a how do you put it? I was spoiled, but I wasn't a brat. So, and when I was 5 years old, I had NES. That was my favorite system of all time at the time, obviously, because I didn't have anything else. But I played that system from morning to night all the fucking time. And, one of my first games of all time was Super Mario Brothers 3. And what I loved about Super Mario Brothers 3 was not only was it so fun, but I loved the little secrets that were sprinkled all throughout that game. Holding down above the white cube and then you falling down, going behind the level. Like, I just thought that was amazing to me. And, I sat there, I played that. I played Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. 1991 was a fun year for me when I discovered video games. And, I owe it all to my mom, because she made sure that I had every video game or whatever I wanted. She made sure I had a good life, and I was very appreciative of it because if any of you ever been in my house, you'd see I still have every system she ever gave me, every stuffed animal. I mean, you name it, I still have it to this day. And, I really, truly not only appreciated that, but it made me the man that I am today in many ways than one. And one of my favorite systems of all time was the Sega Genesis. That system to me, even though Nintendo was my first one, the Genesis, there's something about the Genesis that was just, it was magical. It was raw. It was gritty. It just had this moxie about it, this attitude. and it showed in their adverts on the television and stuff like that. But the one game that really changed my life was Mortal Kombat #1. Now, I'm a big horror movie guy. I've always been since I was a kid. My mom always let me watch it. As long as, it didn't translate to my normal everyday life and I didn't want to kill people, she let me rock out. Same thing with music. I was a big hip hop head, so she would always let me listen to, hip hop and things with cursing in it, as long as I wasn't acting out of pocket. And Mortal Kombat I would never forget, because as you all know, the Genesis version, even though it was graphically, it wasn't the best, where Super Nintendo was the far superior version graphically, it didn't have any blood in it. So the Genesis version had the blood code, ABACABB, or down, up, left, A, right, down, the dollar code, whichever one would get you the blood, which I think it was ABACABB. It's been a while since I played it. But that game was just like, it blew my mind, because it combined things that I love the most. I always love fighting games, Street Fighter and things of that nature. So it combined that with the horror element, with the ripping up of the spine, with Sub-Zero and, Kano and all that stuff. So it absolutely changed my life. And then, just discovering who Ed Boon was as a whole, and, the whole Mortal Kombat team, and how it just looked so realistic. Because games at that time, the graphics were cool, but the fact that they used the real life actors, and it was like, wow, I can't believe it. It's almost like I was watching a movie, which is why I also gravitated towards Pit Fighter and stuff like that. Anything that had that realistic, photogenic look to it, I absolutely adored it. And a funny story about Mortal Kombat, I have two. The first one was that when I had that system, my neighbor, his name was Mike Molinaro. Shout out to Mike. If you're out there somewhere, I hope you're doing well. But he was my neighbor, and I had that game, and he would come over and he'd play it. But his mother found out that he was playing Mortal Kombat at my house, and she just wouldn't have. And from that day on, when she found out that he was playing Mortal Kombat at my house, he was not allowed to come over anymore. And that literally, after he was over 3 or 4 times, that was the last time I ever hung out with that kid. It was absolutely ridiculous. And parents were really scared. It was all in the media, all crazy, all the different news articles about it. They have to put the rating on the games and all this. It was a wild time. But my mom, again, really, really supportive woman, and she just, as long as I didn't act out of pocket, she let me enjoy what I wanted to. So, besides that story, the other story was that my cousin Rocco and his best friend Chris DeLucia, shout out to both of those savage individuals right here. But I used to go and play that game at their house also, because they had a Sega, and they had a Sega CD before I had one. So I'd hang out at their house all the time, and, we all had a Game Pro. We had Game Pro tips and tricks. We loved all those magazines. And there was an article in Game Pro, I forget which year it was. I think it was March of 1994, where they show the Secret Sonya. Secret Sonya was like a glitch / code that when you were able to achieve it, I forget what the criteria was. I can pull up the advert, because I still have it. I still have the page ripped out of Game Pro since they gave it to me in 1994, and I keep it tucked in my Sega Genesis mint condition Mortal Kombat cartridge from when I was a child. So I hope one day that Ed Boon could sign that for me, both of them, the advert as well as that. But Secret Sonya was basically a real glitchy, she looked almost holographic and metallic, and kind of like, what are those things called? That, anodized metal, how it has purples and yellows and greens, it has all these colors melting into each other. It was kind of like that, where she would glitch in color, but she obtained and had every single super move of anybody. Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Shang Tsung. She had all that stuff wrapped into one. It was almost like a super boss. And I never forget the first time I was at their house. I was at the house, at Rocco's house, actually. And they pulled up that Secret Sonya. I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. So for some reason, they gave me that page so that I could take it home and do the steps, whatever it was. And instead of Reptile down there, it was Secret Sonya. And those two memories are very fond of mine. As well as there was a delicatessen around the corner. And now, if anybody's from Verona, New Jersey, you know who Al from Verona Variety is. Now, I'm not going to get into what that dude was all about, but he was a special Indian, probably my favorite Indian I ever met in my whole life. And he had a Mortal Kombat 2 cabinet in there. And I used to go in there all the time, play, because I was obsessed with Mortal Kombat. At the time, I was getting to a point where I memorized all their fatalities. Now, by the time Mortal Kombat went to Mortal Kombat 2, each character had 2 fatalities, amongst some other things. But I was able to memorize all that shit. And I remember I went there, and there was a real tall kid. I mean, I was in middle school, maybe 5th or 6th grade. And we go in there, and there's a tall kid in there. He had to have been 17, 18. And I'll never forget this. He looks at me and he goes, "Hey, baby, want to wrestle?" But he did it kind of like in that Beavis voice. So when he did that, I didn't say anything. I just sat there. Little did he know he was going to touch a young savage. Now, I can't replicate anything I did back then because I haven't touched the game in years. However, I picked Liu Kang because I loved his dragon fatality. And sure enough, I practically flawless victoried this kid and just took him out and just went nuts. And he just looked at me like in disbelief and then just walked away embarrassed. But I mean, that's why a lot of this I owe to Ed Boon and the Mortal Kombat team, because I loved video games before it and I loved video games after it. But I'll never forget the singular impact that game had on me at that age. And it would ultimately, we'll wrap around this to later, it would ultimately, change my life forever. So on another note, as I'm getting into video games, as I'm getting older, the Nintendo 64 comes out. Absolutely phenomenal system for its time. I'll never forget going into Blockbuster and playing on their kiosks and just seeing Super Mario 64. And to bring it back to my mother again, to her credit, she made sure I had whatever I wanted, man. And I'm going to try not to cry right now, but I really wouldn't be anywhere that I am today without that woman. Really. And I never forget, she saw the joy in my eyes playing, because, back then they would let you test the system before it would drop. So I was playing it in Blockbuster, just seeing this 3-dimensional world. I just couldn't believe it. And sure enough, that Christmas, somehow she was able to wait in a line, because nowadays everybody's a keyboard clicker warrior, and you could, if you're savvy enough, you can get stuff online like with ease. But back then it wasn't that easy. You had to get word of mouth, like, oh, I heard KB Toys is getting 50 of them and 20, shit like that. And then you got to race there and hopefully get it. And my mom was hip. She was there. She was about it. You know what I mean? And she made sure that I got that system. And I'll never forget waking up that Christmas morning and seeing this Nintendo 64, and just my whole morning was everything to me. It just I can't even describe that feeling. And it doesn't hit the same. Like now I get, I'm old enough and I could buy whatever system comes out, but it doesn't hit the same anymore. When I was younger and I would open these systems and play these games and sit there for hours and try to figure things out without a game guide, like you can't replicate or bottle that shit and give it away. It's a special thing where if you were there, you were there. And I know every generation, that comes after me, they all, they have their own experience and they do their own stuff and they have their own toys that they like. But I don't know, there's something with me that knows that when you grew up in that time frame, in that generation where video games were coming out and there was console wars, it's nothing like it was now. And I'm a strong believer that it is different, 110%, but whatever, that's neither here nor there. But getting back to the 64, GoldenEye comes out. And that, when I got to experience the multiplayer in GoldenEye, I mean, that was another pivotal moment in my life. Like, there's like before Christ and after this and that. There's always pivotal moments in all throughout history that change everything from that point forth. When it comes to music, like there's always a before and after Michael Jackson, and Kanye West was another pivotal movement, and Drake and things like that. Certain guitarists like Tool, there was definitely a before and after Tool. So there's many bands, there's many products, whether it be clothing, just stuff that's revolutionary and that changes life as we know it. And when GoldenEye came out, that multiplayer experience was unlike anything else. And in comparison to nowadays, we have these huge 100-inch screens and stuff like that. Back then, the average household had like a 20-inch, maybe even less, a cathode ray tube. And, you're playing on split screen and there's these 4 little quadrants and like you could barely see, but it didn't matter. It was everything to us. And the fact that we were all together in the same room, that sense of community, that sense of friendship, and we could just yell at each other while we're playing, I'll never forget replaying those moments in my mind, and then, during these times when this was going on, my parents separated when I was in first grade, permanently. So most of my weekends were spent with my dad. And, what we would do most of the time is we would go to bowling alleys a lot on the weekends and arcades. That was like, arcades were everything to me. And the ones that I would frequent the most, there was one in Bloomfield and it was called Electric Circuit. I'll never forget it. It wasn't in the best area. It wasn't in the worst area though. It was an average area. It was right in between, because you went down Bloomfield Avenue, you go through Montclair, and then as you go down the hill, it gets a little more gutter. But then there's a brief moment where it's like super nice and you hit Glenridge. Glenridge is super, but it's like a square mile, that town. And then you hit, Bloomfield, and you start to get deeper towards Newark. And right around that area is kind of where it starts to get a little dicey. There was a strip club, I think it was called Titillations, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. Then there was a store that I would always shop at called Economy Shoes. Shout out Economy Shoes. That's where I would get a lot of Jordans. That's where I would get all my Mark Echo gear. Like Echo Unlimited was the tits back in the day. But a little further up the street was this arcade called Electric Circuit. And what I remember about this arcade was how clean it was. It had a green awning. And I want to say there was a little face. I don't know if it was a clown face or a lightning bolt. I don't remember, but oddly enough, you can't find any pictures of this shit anywhere. But that arcade, that's where I discovered the game Top Skater, the skateboard game where you would stand in and kick the board. And it was fucking unbelievable. But I remember going there a lot with my dad. And of course, Fun and Games. Fun and Games was the greatest arcade of all time, which I'll touch on in a little bit and what that place means to me. But, whenever I'd hang out with my dad on the weekends, we'd go to these places. And, a lot of shooters started coming out around this time. Shooters meaning, multiplayer deathmatch style shooter games. And, I get my computer in 8th grade. I was in 8th grade in 1999. That's what we ended the school year off, 1999. Started in 98. The school year ended in 99. And I get my first computer in 8th grade. And this just opened up like an entire world to me. The way that I can relate it to is getting your license for the first time. See, now the funny thing about getting your license is nowadays means a lot different than it does, the times of yesteryear. Because now you got days and ages of Uber and stuff like that. Kids are now almost afraid to even drive now. Years ago, I was foaming out the fucking mouth. I couldn't wait to drive my car. The fact that once I get my license, this is my car. I can go wherever I want, see whoever I want. It was insane. Nowadays, kids couldn't care less about that shit. There's more and more kids now getting their license when they're fucking 25 out of college and shit because they don't really care. They just get an Uber or a ride everywhere, which is so weird. But the shooters came out and I get my, I'm not sure if it was I forget. I've had many. I've had Hewlett Packards. I've had Dells. I've had Presarios, compact Presarios. I'm not sure which one it was that I had first. I think it was a compact Presario, but when I got that shit, it opened the absolute floodgates. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. And around this time in 1999, 2 games came out that also changed my life. See, during this podcast, there's going to be a lot of moments which I keep saying that were like, this changed my life, because it's true. I have many pivotal moments that just altered not only my way of thinking, but it just altered a lot of things that I embodied and that surround my life. And Quake 3 Arena came out and Unreal Tournament. And those 2 games single-handedly were unbelievable. Once I discovered that I could play online with people and I got hip to the mouse and keyboard, and that shit was absolutely nuts. And another thing about Quake 3 Arena, which that's one of those other things I'm going to have to talk about later. That's when I started discovering that you could mod stuff in the game. So that's going to also, come around full circle. But, after I got my computer, after I did all that stuff, I was just playing these games nonstop all over the place while going to arcades with my dad, going to bowling alleys. things of that nature. And then obviously there's AOL. You get a 56K BPS modem, you have AOL, that unlocks the whole chat room thing. I was getting into, MIRC. I was getting movies before they came out, playing Fast and the Furious on my Dreamcast. I was getting everything you could think of. But there was another game that I have to highlight that was very important to my late middle school, early high school life, and that was a game called Splatterball. Do any of you remember what Splatterball was? It was this really old school 8-bit, 16-bit style video game that was essentially a paintball game. And, each weapon would have a different projectile. They would have different ranges on them, different damage factors, the whole nine. And this is another game that was kind of a precursor to the grid as far as how I got used to just walking into guns and grabbing them and health and stuff like that. But Splatterball was absolutely amazing. And then after Splatterball came Splatterball Plus, where it was on a website, not an AOL chat room, and you would sit there, and you would I used to do crazy shit when I was a kid on these AOL chat rooms. So to any of you computer nerds out there, if you remember back in those times when I was like 8th grade, we're talking 99, 2000, 2001, I got hip to quote unquote hacking. And a group of us, me and my friends, were hip to Sub 7, things like that. Spizam 2K. Yeah, I remember Spizam 2K with the fucking, I could picture it now what that program looked like. But what we were doing back then is we were getting credit card numbers. Fuck, I shouldn't even be saying this stuff right now, but that's what we were doing online. We were getting hip to it. But I wasn't doing anything too malicious with the credit card numbers. Basically, what you would do is you would have a spammer app, which was Spizam 2K. You would load this program. You would pre-script an email that would look like it's from AOL. And what this app would do is it would randomly open chat rooms very, very fast. Email every single username in that chat room, close it, open another one, email. So what it would do is it would do this as long as you're running the app. And these people will go to the website. But if you remember, AOL will always ask you. We will never ask you for your billing information, password, this and that. But people, unfortunately are a little dumb. And I was a kid. I would never do that shit now, but I was younger. So I was spamming all these chat rooms. And in these chat rooms, they'd get these emails. And sometimes they would kick back the information to you. So obviously when they hit send, you'd set up an email with Thundermail or something. I think that was the one that I was using back then. And then you'd open the Thundermail and you'd get all these hits from whoever was actually submitting these forms. And sometimes you'd get other hackers that would be like, oh, fuck you, think I'm stupid, stuff like that. But then you'd get people that would send everything, and they would have a credit card they use for AOL, a credit card they don't use for AOL, their CV number, their master screen name, master password. So me and my friends would always just play like online games with them. Now, sometimes they'd rock out for a week and then they'd get shut down once they find out their credit card number was stolen. So you'd keep going through, and I would have like emails with like 500 plus like credit card numbers in it. Terrible, I know. But we were playing games like Mage Storm, Splatterball, and stuff like that. I just had to bring that up because Splatterball those days was about that. And there was one crew in Splatterball called NF, which stood for No Fear. And the one name that always stood out to me was Polo NF, and that kid was nice. Polo NF, if you for some reason hear this, please contact me, message my YouTube channel, whatever the case may be. I'd love to just chat with you for a bit, but I ended up becoming a member of NF, and we was running, me and my boy James June, he's a grid kid, shout out to James. He was out there playing Splatterball with us too. We were running amok. It was absolutely crazy. So I discovered the grid around the same time the original Xbox came out. So the grid came out in 2000. I was going to Fun and Games a lot, but when I was a freshman, which was the year 2000, I wasn't going to Fun and Games as much as I ended up going later on, like in my junior and senior year. But around that same time is when the original Xbox came out. The original Xbox came out November 15th of 2001. And that was something I will never forget for the rest of my life. That was one of the most conscious moments that I've had in my life where I vividly remember waiting in line for that system. Now, for those of you that used to hang out in Willowbrook Mall, I know you remember vividly software, etc., electronic boutique, and, like the locations of them. There was one upstairs, one downstairs, all that shit. This is like pre-GameStop. And I believe this one was this is the one that was downstairs in the corner across from the food court. It might have been Software Etc. And I know they switched at one point. I'm going to say Software Etc. It might have been Electronic Boutique, but I'm going to say Software Etc. And, we found a way to get in at night because they didn't have a release indoors till 12, but if there was a way you could find an open door somewhere and then just get in there and wait in front of the store before they even opened the doors outside, that's what we did. It was me, my boy Anthony Gosell, and someone else. So we're waiting up. And if you remember these old video game releases, you would line up outside the store. We were lining up all the way around, almost around the corner. But I remember, I'll never forget, I was number 16 in line. And the reason why that number is so significant is because if you remember on the original Xbox, there was a DVD remote. It was a receiver that you would plug in a controller port and then the remote to control the DVD player. And I needed that DVD player. There was nothing I could do. I needed that shit. So we're waiting in line. I'm sitting there and he comes outside before I realized I was number 16. And the guy says, we don't have enough remotes tonight. We only have 16 of them. So I'll never forget me sitting in front of me and just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, 16. And I was dumb hyped because even if a couple of people in front of me weren't number 6 or, they weren't getting the remote, at least I knew it secured me one no matter what. Maybe even past a couple people behind me, But we get that system. I never forget. We finally get it. We get home. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning and Anthony sleeps over at my house. The one thing about my mom that was the greatest was as long as people were safe in our house around her, she didn't care how late it was because she could sit there and she knows that as long as she's got her eye on us, we're all good. So I'm a freshman in high school. We go in there. We get our sophomore in high school. We get the game. We're sitting there. We're playing. And that was the first time I discovered Halo. So like I told you, okay, a year or two prior is when I really started loving the first-person shooter thing because I already had the GoldenEye experience. I already got to feel that sense of when you're in the same room. But then Halo drops, and it's a totally different animal. Halo was just totally different. And I say that retrospectively, I'm not a Halo guy. I'm more of a Call of Duty guy if we have to compare the two. And mainly because back then, Halo was very, very slow-paced. Even the respawning, boop, 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 boop. I know you all know that sound. Now, I liked Halo, but it was just a little slow for me, which is why I really loved Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 Arena because it was very fast. It was like Doom where you're almost gliding, grabbing rocket launcher, exploding shit, stabbing, going crazy, running into health, running into ammo, trying to find the special guns, the rail gun, that stuff to me was ill. And then I get Halo and it's just like, I get that one classic level where you got to ride the vehicle to the other side or you're sitting there sniping. Like it was fire to the Halo fans out there. It just was a little slow pace for me. And I loved that chaos of Quake 3 Arena and of Unreal Tournament. But nonetheless, that game was still fucking fire. Halo 1, Halo 2 were hands down crazy. But it was just nuts to like play that game for the first time and just to see the world is literally in a halo. And you look up when you're on the grassy knoll and you look up and you see that the planet is a wrap in a ring. It was crazy. It was definitely a revolutionary game. Master Chief, sick character, love it. It was a good time. But that's kind of around the time when I discovered the Grid. Now, like I said, the Grid came out in 2000, but I cannot talk about the Grid without talking about Fun and Games first. Fun and Games was the greatest arcade of all time. Not only that, it was one of those things where not even if you know, it's you had to be there. You had to be there to experience the entity that was Fun and Games. I mean, Fun and Games was a place where outcasts, popular kids, dweebs, geeks, and weirdos, gangsters, thugs, goths, we would all come together there and we'd all be family. no matter our race, creed, ideology, it didn't matter. Fun and Games was a place that kept a lot of kids off the street, and it made you feel welcome. You could be in high school. You can go there. You could be made fun of. You could feel like shit at home. You can get beat by your parents. But once you got to Fun and Games, all of that stuff left you, and you were in this place where you felt like home. And that's something that I can't even explain to you in words how important this place was, not only to me, but to anybody else that grew up in northern New Jersey that got to experience it. I mean, just picture this. It's a Friday or Saturday night, and you pull up to Fun and Games. The sun has just set. It's starting to get dark out. That beautiful Fun and Games marquee illuminated. The sound in the distance of muffled arcade machines and pinball machines going ballistic because the doors are closed. The closer you get to the entrance, picture the Friday, Saturday night. You walk by, there's tons and groups of people all clicked out. There's a bunch of bloods over there, a bunch of goths over here. Remember the old gothic rings, the full finger metal rings with the joints and articulation? They're all over there, face painted. You got a bunch of computer nerds over there. You got a bunch of football players over there. Everybody's there. They're a little clicked up because they're having their smoke break or drug break, whatever it is. But then you look in front of you and you see this mecca. This mecca, and you don't even know what's going to hit. You open those doors, the sounds get more loud, more prevalent, and you walk through these gates of heaven, and you see a well-curated selection of some of the best arcade games to ever exist under one roof. You go in there, you got fighting games, you got dance games, Japanese imports, all this stuff. I mean, it was such a special time, and the fact that everybody got along is what made it even better. This was our escape. You understand? Fun and Games was our second home. No matter what problems we had outside of that place, Fun and Games made everything go away. It was a place where you could go to be yourself and not get judged. That's the best takeaway I could get from that establishment. Not only were the people there that worked there great, but everybody that hung out, we all got together in unison. And that is a feeling that I've been trying to capture my whole life, which I honestly could say that I accomplished, which we'll get into later. But Fun and Games was so special to me. It was so special to everybody else. And, it was a place where you could be yourself. You truly, no matter what problems you had, no matter what interests you had, we were all family there. And that's something that a lot of kids don't get now, and they never will get. And all of this to say, at the same time, this is a place where you develop street smarts. I mean, there was a lot of shady characters that hung out there. And look, as much as I'm glorifying this place, there was a lot of this place that was dangerous. Okay, Willowbrook Mall was very dangerous at one point in time. And that's essentially kind of what led to the closing down of Fun and Games. But this place helped you build character. It helped you know what to look out for. It helped you navigate through some rough terrain. And I think that if you survived Fun and Games, you deserve some sort of Social Security check or some SSI check, because the amount of diseases we probably dodged from that place, I couldn't even imagine. The sharing of cigarettes. I mean, I used to smoke Newport 100s and Newports. That was my thing. And we'd always fucking, between games, you go outside, you smoke, everybody's out there. I mean, it was a crazy place, but it was a very important place. And, I got to say, I don't know where I'd be without Fun and Games. It was a very important part of my life, and it was a very important part of a lot of people's lives. And if you all remember out there, if you're a real Fun and Games nerd, you got to remember that if you went and bought slices at Colella's Pizzeria and stuff at Bourbon Chicken, you would take your receipt back to Fun and Games and you'd get a free fucking game. 2 tokens, fresh. Most of the games back then, you threw 2 tokens in and you were good. I mean, you gotta remember that. That was one of my favorite parts probably about Fun and Games. I would go to Colella's and just go ham. And there was always a trick you could do. You could tell some of the guys there, hey, my thing, hey, my quarter, whatever. Then Rich Corbo, shout out to Rich Corbo, he'd open it up, ging, 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 give you a bunch of credits, and you'd be on your way. It was a magical place, an absolutely magical environment. And it's why I created the diorama that I have in my house today, which I'll throw some pictures up. Listen, I recommend you all watch this episode, not listen to it, because I'm going to throw so many visuals during this. It's amazing. This is almost like not only a grid documentary, but it's a small documentary on a certain portion of my life. I did a lot of stuff, but this is a documentary on a certain portion of my life. And I love Fun and Games so much that it had such a strong impact on me that I had to create a miniature diorama based on the entrance to the place. And the way this thing came out, anybody that knows me that has been in my house that has seen it, I mean, I'm going to post pictures here now. When you look at this thing, it transports you to there. It's shout out to my man that made it for me, my Iranian brother. It was a crazy task. There's a guy named Ryan Monahan, which is his Instagram is what the hell. He's my favorite miniature designer of all time. He makes things, scales them down, and it looks like you're literally there. I wanted to use him, but at the time my budget was a little shorter than his, and I met some extraordinarily talented dude. If anybody wants to know his ad, I don't remember it off my head. It's like MF something diorama. I forget his Instagram name. I'm sorry to my brother. I don't have it in front of me now. But when I found him, I consider myself to have a really good, how do I put it? A taste and attention to detail. I think I have a good worldly, general, positive taste when it comes to aesthetics for anything. And I found this guy on Instagram and I was like, wow, this guy, he wasn't really known. So I knew he'd be a little cheaper, but his talent was unmatched. The only problem is we have a big language barrier. So when I originally found him to commission him for the Fun and Games piece, it was a little, it took some time because our language barrier. And, I'm very particular, and especially a piece like this, because Fun and Games is so special to me. I need the colors to be right. I need this to be right. And, he made this fully functional with the light up marquee, with the lights on the side that were on the side of both sides of the entrance, the stucco, like everything was after a lot of revision and, painstaking revisions, because I'm such a savage. Luckily, he stuck it out with me and he trusted in me and he had patience with me because I'm so difficult. But, I'm just one of those guys, man. If I'm paying you for a service, it's got to come out exactly how I want it. And sure enough, it did. And, I tip my hat to him. It was, you tell me what you think when you see the stuff that I'm scrolling here now. It's absolutely beautiful. And the fact that the lights work, and he even got the, inside the place, they were like blinds over the doors. It was kind of like not window tint, kind of. So it would keep the sunlight from coming inside to maintain that nice dark level so you could see all the arcade machines and, diminish the glare. Bro, it was crinkled though from like raising it up and down so much. He even added that. He added the garbage can. If you remember, there was an American flag sticker, the store hours on the felt board. It's like he included all that shit. And it was tough to find all the pictures of it because you can't really find, like I said, Electric Circuit. You can't find pictures of that shit anywhere. But I was able to find pictures of this Fun and Games, the entrance and stuff, and to get the coloring right, the tint of the stucco had to be right for me. That dude's a saint for dealing with me. But, that's how important that place is to me that, I had to get it done. It was absolutely a must. And, he delivered. He accomplished it more than I could ever imagine. And, I'm incredibly in his debt for, and thankful to him for what he's done for me. So it was 2001 and I finally see what the grid is. Now the grid came out in the year 2000. I think it was either like late spring, early summer, maybe even fall of 2000, but I'm not really sure when Fun and Games exactly got the grid. I don't think they got it as soon as it came out. I think they got it right after. So, I went into high school in 99. I graduated freshman year. Graduated, you know what I mean? Exited freshman year in the year 2000. And then, 2001 was the following year. I think 2001 is when I discovered the grid at Fun and Games. My brain's a little fuzzy, but I'm going to say sophomore year. And I'll never forget walking into Fun and Games and seeing that triple set sitting there. It was when you walk in the main entrance in the front of Fun and Games, because Fun and Games had two entrances. They had the front and they had the side by the mall entrance. So if you walk in the front, it was in the back right corner by the MTV drumscape, by the hoop machine. And I'll never forget seeing it. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And it had a very attractive attract mode, if you will. It had that one section where it was like a remote changing a TV channel, and then you get to see the gameplay, and then the high scores would like scroll, and like, today's best rounds, today's best money, or, overall high score, total points, total money, like all that stuff. And you get to see like these stats of like who's the top dog in the game. And like, I was like, what is this? Now, before I go in and dive further, let me explain to you all to answer the one question that a lot of people ask me, like I mentioned earlier in my intro and in the beginning. What is the grid? So I'm going to read a description that comes from the back of the grid flyer that was handed out to arcade operators. And that would hopefully explain a good gist of it for you. So it reads as follows. Forget about becoming a millionaire. Forget about surviving 39 days on a deserted island. Put down the remote and check out the hottest game show available from Midway. This futuristic game show unleashes its contestants into a holographic computer-generated arena known as the Grid, where a studio audience cheers on the contestants. Cash, points, and even the contestants' virtual lives are on the line, making this the most intense competition ever. Players choose from 8 selectable characters, each equipped with their own special weapon and superpower. Everyone is then transported into the virtual arena, where a survival of the fittest battle takes place, and the player with the most points and the most money wins. Sounds serious, but the grid has so many humorous elements integrated in it. Even the beginners will enjoy the ride. Up to 6 players can compete against one another using an arsenal of over 25 different weapons, super moves, and hand-to-hand combat. The grid also offers a unique, equally compelling single-player mode where you compete against the clock to get enough points within time allowed. The grid control panel consists of a trackball, a super move button, a keypad, and a joystick. To encourage repeat play, the keypad allows players to store their relevant information, including names, last level conquered, and points accumulated. Experience this entirely new genre of arcade competition and watch how fast the addiction develops. Now, that is the overall basic description of what the grid is. And you really have to play it to understand how amazing it is. You got to understand, the grid checks a lot of boxes for me personally. It's got a fighting game element to it because you can use hand-to-hand combat when you're out of a weapon and you have nothing. You have your hands. So it gives you the ability to, within close range, grab somebody and slam them, which ultimately kills them, and then you obtain everything automatically, what they have, their health, their ammo, and their, etc. And their money, rather. So it combines that. It combines the gore element, because when you have the normal parental settings on, which shows blood and stuff when you use certain weapons in the game. Let's use the railgun, for instance. You burst somebody, boom! The limbs explode everywhere, just like it would in Mortal Kombat and a fatality. You got Mortal Kombat characters in the game. You got secret characters. You got all this stuff, it was fast paced, like Quake 3 Arena, like Unreal Tournament. But there was something different about it than all those games. All those games are first person, whereas the Grid is third person. Sound familiar? What game right now in the present day climate is so goddamn popular and it's in third person? Fortnite. The Grid came out in a time, it was ahead. I should put it this way. The Grid was ahead of its time. If it would have came out now or something maybe 5-10 years ago, it would have succeeded far beyond its abilities. You see, the Grid came out in a time when the arcade industry was in a major downfall. It was declining rapidly. A lot of these mom and pop arcades were shutting down. They couldn't survive, and the reason for that was due to the home console market really skyrocketing and, integrating the internet into these systems with Xbox Live Arcade. I mean, even Dreamcast had online capabilities, but you start incorporating that I don't even have to leave my house and I can play multiplayer with somebody not only within the same room, not only within the same town, but I can play with these people across the entire planet. It kind of changed the game and it kind of shook up the arcade industry. And that's why all these arcades started slowing down. Now, Midway didn't go out of business until I believe later on, like I think 2000, I would have to Google it, 2007-ish, which is also oddly enough when Fun and Games closed down. But the last arcade game was in 2000. Now, there was two other arcade games that Midway dropped in the year 2000. I think it was Kart Fury, something else. There was three games, and the Grid being as everybody is knowing it as the last arcade game they ever came out with. But there was also two others that came out at the same time. And when this stuff came out, it came out when arcades were dwindling. Not to mention, the Grid is a special case because what I love about the Grid the most is what probably hurt it the most is the fact that it requires a lot of real estate. Now, the Grid is, it's a standalone, as in one person could stand in front of it, which I love because it gives you the space. When you have like a Mortal Kombat cabinet and you're playing with two people on the same cabinet, it's kind of, it's not that much elbow room. Whereas the Grid, it's one person to each cabinet. But to make the game fun, even though it has a single player game, you gotta hook up and link multiple cabinets. Now, it's not fun when you have one or two. You gotta do minimum of three. And a lot of places just couldn't afford the real estate because it takes up a lot of space. Especially my space here in my home arcade. You can see some grids right here as I touch this beautiful control panel, and I'll explain why I have my setup the way it is later on. But the Grid takes up a lot of real estate, and coming out in a time when the arcade industry was dropping, it was a recipe for fucking disaster. And that's kind of why the Grid didn't succeed in the time it did. But if you look at it side by side, and you're looking at the Grid and you're looking at Fortnite, you remove the building element and the super, super large maps that are on Fortnite, it's very similar. It has the humor to it. It's got the fun where you run in, you find new weapons, ammo, all this stuff. It's very similar. And in the Grid, it's kind of like it's within the same universe, but it came out at the wrong time. But if it came out now, I would really consider it being, largely successful. But the fact that it took up so much real estate is kind of probably what most people didn't want to get involved in. And when I say most people, I mean arcade operators. And what was very unique about the Grid was that the Grid was a made-to-order system. Made-to-order arcade machine. They didn't make 40,000 of them and then just try to sell them. They only made as much as the arcade operators ordered, which not only made the game more obscure, but what made matters worse is that since that was Midway's last arcade game, the customer service and the manufacturing of all the parts for the game halted not only sooner than it should have, but it made stuff impossible to obtain once Midway fully shut down. And that's another contributor to the obscurity and the rarity of the Grid Arcade, is because of that. It was kind of like it was all these elements combining at once that kind of made it a difficult environment to exist. But nonetheless, the game is super fun. Third person arena deathmatch, which is my favorite thing. Like I told you, I loved Quake 3 Arena. I loved Unreal Tournament. I love anything that is a deathmatch arena. Just kill. Like when it comes to Call of Duty and stuff, which I'll touch on later, loved that game, but I was more of a team deathmatch guy because I come from a place where I enjoy Red Faction, stuff like that, where I just want to kill everybody and run around and have a good time. Not to mention, I want it to be fast paced. Whereas, games like Halo, and then when you're doing domination and this, and the maps get bigger, and even in present day when they're doing what is that shit, Battle Royale, I hate that stuff because it's so large. People are camping, waiting, it takes forever. I like action. So that was another reason why the Grid spoke so much to me, is because it was such high energy action, fast paced, and it was unique. And what was amazing about it was the control panel. Like I mentioned in the description when I read to you all the description. The control panel has a joystick, which you use your left hand with, not your right. It's got two buttons on it. It's got a thumb button, which is the jump button, the trigger, which is the fire button, and it's got this trackball, which acts as your aiming. Okay? Now, the trackball is basically, if you've all played Golden Tee, the golf game or a bowling game, it's basically the same thing, but it's what's called a 3-inch high set trackball. What that means by high set is it's set higher up in the control panel, where more of the 3-inch ball, looks like a cue ball, is exposed. Whereas Golden Tee, it's very flush. It's more so not even, but it's more even with the control panel itself, so you can get more of a smooth glide over it. Whereas the Grid, it's higher set, so you can get more of a hold on the ball, which makes it actually a lot more comfortable. And then it has a keypad, a number keypad, and a super move button, along with the start button, but that doesn't really count. Now, each character in the game has a super move. So you got 8 normal characters to choose from. Each character has their own stock weapon that they spawn with initially. And then obviously they're not super powerful, but they're just something, they're good to start with. And so you have something in a pinch when you respawn and things of that nature. And then obviously there's 25 other weapons that, as a whole, that you run around and you walk into, and that's how you obtain the next weapon you get. And then obviously you start to get familiar with what weapons you like. Each weapon has its own range, has its own damage, reload times, respawn, things like that. And there's actually 20 total characters in the game. So you got 8 normal characters, which is Wes, Flint, April, Cyrus, Ike, Chiller, Trixie, and Karasu. Those are all the normal characters. They all have their own super move. They all have their own regular base weapon. And then there's the keypad. So what's special about the keypad is, this is what probably attracted me to the Grid the most, is that you could use this keypad to create your own username. Now, it requires that there's 10 digits that you're able to enter, minimum of 5. So most people do their phone number. 973-555-5555, whatever the case may be. And it creates your own user account. Within your own user account, you pick your own name. There's obviously a certain amount of letters that you could use for your name, but after you select your name, you could select something what's called your call name. Now, your call name is used for when you're actually in the game and you're on a kill streak or whatever the case may be. The AI of the host, which is named Chuck Smiley, who you can also earn as a special character later on in the game, it's what he would call you when you're on said streak. But there was also a limited amount of what you can choose. So, when you create your name, you create your code, remember it, it creates your account, you collect you select your call name as well. Mine was always the Master, because I love just hearing him go, "The Master is ahead by whatever points." That was always like my my favorite thing on the planet was to hear that. And I actually have, here it is, ready?
The master.
I always loved hearing,
The master
is ahead by 10 points. So that was what I always checked. But there was so many names you could do. There was regular names. There was names like Godzilla, like all these weird names that you could pick as your call name. But it was cool because it could make you could include your individuality in the game, your personality. You could project it. And it was a lot of fun. And it also made you strive for stuff. Like if you wanted to, like I said, there's 20 total characters in the game, 8 basic characters, and there's 12 secret characters. Now, each secret character has their own criteria to be able to unlock them. For instance, Noob Saibot. You all know who Noob Saibot is, right? If you play Mortal Kombat, you all got to know who Noob Saibot is. Now, obviously, the name Noob Saibot is Ed Boon's last name and John Tobias's last name reversed, combined. So, Noob, which is Boon, and Saibot, Tobias, backwards. He's actually a special character in the game. Now, him, in order to earn him, there's a couple different things that have to come into play. When the grid first came out, there was version 1.1, right? Like most arcade games, if you know about arcade games, whenever they would have upgrades to the software, they would include EEPROM chips that you would have to swap out on the PCB board. I'll throw a picture up for those watching so you can see what I'm talking about. I'll throw a picture of the grid PCB board specifically. There's a spot. There's like U10, 11, 12, 13, I forget. There's like 4 different ways to, there's 4 different slots that in which you would update it to 1.2, right? So when the game came out, shortly after, they put the version 1.2 out. Now, version 1.2, what it did was it added 2 special characters that weren't available in version 1.1 or 1.0, whatever it is. You got Noob Saibot and you got Red Dog. So Noob Saibot, if you beat the 1-player game, it would unlock him in your account. Now, when you load your account up, how you would know you would unlock any character was all the way on the bottom. You'll see a random head with like a glow around them. And then as you earn them all, they would stack up and they would fill the screen when you would get all 12 of them. Now, the way you earn each secret character is by meeting a certain criteria. And usually the criteria is beating the game an X amount of times, collecting a certain amount of money, or collecting a certain amount of kills. And that's how you would get all these characters. And there's another element that's really cool to the game. When you beat the game, the 1-player game, every time you start the game and you go to the character select screen, pretty simple screen. You're in this grid box. The character that's highlighted is on display in front of you, like a virtual model of the character. On the left and right-hand side, there's the headshots of each character that you can select. Very similar to Mortal Kombat. Since this was created by the Mortal Kombat team, it kind of translated the same way. So you have these 8 characters down the side, which you would move either your joystick or the trackball to select each one. And then every time you hover over one and highlight, it would select them. Then on the bottom, there's a 3-digit box, 000, and it's in red. Now, remember I talk about the keypad and how you use that to make your own account with a code so you can access it every time. But there's also special codes for the game. Now, there's a lot of different codes that came out. Some arcade machines, if you look, I'll probably have to put up a picture, but the bezel around each arcade monitor on each grid machine, on the top, it's always the same. It shows all the 8 characters up top, and on the bottom, it's either one of 2 things. It'll just show you what the control panel consists of. It'll show you what the buttons do, keypad, trackball, that aims. It'll show you something like that. And the other one, it'll have a random like 12 codes that you could enter during that screen. Now, if you're a Mortal Kombat player, you know that when you play Mortal Kombat, you could enter in some weird codes and unlock some crazy shit and do some weird stuff. So it would give you a hint of what you could do. And it's usually very simple things like fast return, meaning when you die and you respawn, you come back to the game quicker. Big head, big hands, all weapons, like all cannons, all flash cannons, all bazookas, flash cannon is the railgun. A certain level. It would do things like that. So either some of them would require everybody to enter or just for you, right? So now this is the same area where you would access the characters that you earn. So like I said, there's certain criteria. So the hardest character to obtain in the game is Cameraman. Now, here's what's interesting about, I'm sorry to nerd out, but here's what's interesting about upgrading from version 1.1 to 1.2. The criteria changes when you upgrade the game to 1.2 for all the other characters. For instance, the hardest character to get is Cameraman. In version 1.1, the Cameraman would require 7,500 kills. Once you obtain that many kills, you would unlock that character that you could access all the time. In version 1.2, he requires 10,000 kills. He requires 2,500 more kills. I'm not sure why they made it more difficult in version 1.2, but that is what happened. So that's the incentive of having a user account, being able to, because when you play the one-player game, you obviously obtain money and kills. But no matter if you play the one-player game or multiple, the multiplayer, all those kills and points and money translate and save into your account. So, some people were afraid if I play the one-player game, I'm not going to be able to, rack up my money, rack up my. No, that's not the case. It all correlates. It all coexists together, and it all matters when it comes to your account. But there was also some cool incentives, like let's say you beat the one-player game once. When you beat the single player once and you go to play multiplayer, when you use the cannonball weapon and you shoot the cannonball projectile, your cannonball will now be the color gold. And that would be a signifier that you beat the game at least one time, which is a really cool Easter egg. And I really enjoyed that. If you beat the game twice, you would get something called morphing mode. Now, if you enter that in, what happens is every time you play the multiplayer, when you enter morphing mode, every time you die, you respawn as a new basic character, meaning one of the original 8. And if you beat the game 3 times, that's when you would unlock Red Dog. Red Dog is kind of a character. Now most people recognize the grid as being inspired from multiple areas and multiple avenues. One of them being the movie The Running Man, and the other one being the other Williams game called Smash TV. Now, if you look at the character Red Dog, he looks just like one of the characters in Smash TV. So it obviously makes sense. When I asked the developers, why'd you name him Red Dog and who is Red Dog, the only answer I got from Mike and Ed Boon was his name was Clifford, but because of copyright reasons, we couldn't name him Clifford, so we named him Red Dog. Why they wanted to name him Clifford, I'm not sure. But it's a black man that has the same helmet, like, similar to the Smash TV guys. And his super move is kind of like Kano's cannonball when he rolls at you and hits you. It's kind of similar to that, but it's very slow pace. And then the other characters, like the cheerleaders, the host, and there's 2 other Mortal Kombat characters. You got Sub-Zero and you got Scorpion. And those have their own criteria. You could look, I could throw up the codes for you. You could look them up online, but it shows you like what it takes to do that. And there's one other thing before I move on. I know I'm nerding out a little bit, but there's one other thing that's really cool in the game is the badge system. Now, it took me a while, but luckily that I connected with Mike Boone, which I'll speak on a little bit later, I was able to figure out what these badges mean. So like I already told you, you have the character select screen, and you got the little code thing at the bottom, which is beside the 2 eight selectable characters. Now, when you beat the game one time, to the right of that 3 code pad is a scroll that appears. And each time you beat the game, the number changes within the scroll. So if you beat the game one time, it'll have a number 1 in that gold scroll. If you beat the game 40 times, it'll show the number 40 in there. Now, on the other side of that number code pad, a badge randomly appears. Now, you got a picture. me playing this game, not knowing much about it, just being thrown in this world, if you will, in amazement. Playing this game, and then all of a sudden, a random symbol just appears next to that. And the first symbol is basically like an army, like a war medal. It's got the ribbon, a small ribbon, little area with a skull in the middle. Nobody, now I'm talking, I didn't know what any of these meant until later on, more present time, when I actually owned these machines and I started a dialogue with the developers, because there was no information on this badge stuff. Now, if you're watching this, I'm going to throw the badge table up here right now that I got from Mike Boone, Ed Boone's brother, because he still had access to all the coding. And luckily, he answered a lot of questions, which I'll explain later. He answered a lot of questions for me. But there's a certain criteria for each badge. The only thing I knew for sure is that once you got the last character, which was cameraman, 10,000 kills, the crown appears, which means you're the king. And there's no other symbol that you're going to get, no other badge, rather, that you're going to get besides the crown. But there was all these other ones in between, and I was always just curious on the criteria of that. And thanks to Mike Boone, he let me know. He pulled from the game code to give me the exact answers for all the questions that I had, and he shows me all of the badges, their criteria, and how they came to be, which was it was unbelievable. Now, what's even crazier about the grid is after I discovered it and I got obsessed with it, I couldn't put it down, dude. I mean, I was going to high school, you know. I didn't like school that much. I wasn't the biggest fan of school in general. So every day after high school, man, I would put my bag in my locker, and I would take the 29 bus, from Bloomfield Ave up to Famous Ray's. If any of you from Verona, you know what I'm talking about. Then I would take the 11 bus over to Willowbrook. And my mom was busting ass. My mom was a single parent. She was, doing whatever she could to provide for us. And, not to say that I was a horrible son, but I wasn't the best. I rebelled a bit. I was kind of like a confused teenager. And I fucking hated school. So I entered high school in honors classes. And then I guess you could say I rebelled a little bit. And my mom was working 2 jobs, busting ass. And I would just throw my bags in my locker and just go to the arcade. The grid completely consumed me. Like I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time when I get obsessed with something, anybody that knows me could tell you, like I just go all in, and I was completely obsessed with the grid. It was so much fun to me. I can't describe to you. And the fact that you can create your own username. There was bars you could set for yourself. Like I wanted to be number 1 on those fucking machines. So in order to do that, I would have to play a lot and stack up and do this. So when you set a goal like that, it's over. I constantly set goals for myself throughout life, and I just kept going and going and going all the fucking time. But what was amazing about it was I'm going to the arcade. I don't know much about this game. All I think is 3 is the max. One day, I go in there and the power goes out in fun and games. So it kicks back up. Now, if you've ever seen a grid machine turn back on, got the diagnostic menu comes up. It shows like a little diagram of the PCB. Fires off everything. The 0 power RAM's okay. U12. It just goes through it's like what most arcade machines do. They go through their normal like diagnostic checklist. And then the screen loads up, grid, and then it shows finding machines. I didn't know this. I look on the screen, and it shows 1, 2, 3, but I see there's 3 other slots. 4, 5, 6. Now this is before I really got involved with the grid and started going online and doing my research and due diligence when it comes to the grid community and presence in other states. But I'm like, you could connect 6 of these, but there wasn't much more space and fun and games for that to happen. But the fact that you could connect 6, I was like, wow, this is like unheard of. And then something clicked in me. When you're playing the 1-player game, brief synopsis of the one-player game, very similar to Mortal Kombat, how there's a tower and you have to climb the tower, right? Only difference is with the grid, there's 10 towers. Each tower, the difficulty gets harder. The color of each tower changes as you go up, and there's a maximum of 10 towers. What's unique about the 10th tower is it's black in color, and when you play any of the levels within the 10 tower, which there's 6 of each tower, so there's 60 levels in total for the one-player game, they're all developer heads. So each character that you play against, or each bot rather, in the 10th tower, it's all a developer head. So it's really cool. And in the first 4 towers, the 6th level is always Grid World, which is the first time you get to see what Grid World looks like, which is a secret multiplayer level that all 3 players or all 6, whoever's playing the multiplayer game at the time, they all have to enter the same code, which is 930. That'll bring you to Grid World, which is another thing. And you got to remember, I found the game of Fun and Games, and I wasn't really playing it anywhere else. There wasn't many arcades that had it, but there was a couple other that I discovered. There was Broadway City Arcade in the city, which was nuts. And that was kind of like the first time, I believe it was in Times Square. I forget where it was, but I had my parents take me there one time. And I remember that it was the first arcade that I ever saw used cards to swipe to play the game. So like instead of a change machine, you would go and put money and it would spit out a card that you would keep with you and reload. And that was the first time I ever seen that, Broadway City Arcade. And they had a 3 set there, which was dope. And then there was another arcade called Sports and Games, which is now called Funplex on Route 10 in East Hanover. Phenomenal place, but they had a 3 set. And it was the crispiest 3 set that I've ever played on. And it didn't last there that long, because once they started moving arcades out, incorporating, they have a water park there now, all this crazy shit. But I remember those were the only places that had it. And again, I didn't know you could play on 6 fucking machines. But this place, it only had 3 as well. So it's like, I didn't know of any other place that had 6. And I was really wondering when I could ever experience that. Now, the reason why I was talking about the single player is as you progress through these towers and things like that, you'll notice that some levels that you're used to seeing in multiplayer are larger and they're altered in a certain way. So I would come to find out later on that when you're playing on 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 cabinets, the multiplayer levels are small. Now, when you incorporate the 4th cabinet, 3 to 4, there's a medium-sized map. And then when you add 5 to 6 cabinets, it's the large maps. So now, obviously in the beginning, in the infancy stages of me playing this game and becoming a gridaholic, I've never played on that stuff. And the fact that none of the arcades by me had more than 3 cabinets, me and my friends never, ever got to experience that. But I would always dream about it, what it would be like, because clearly those maps existed by playing the one-player game when you progress through the towers. And there's more and more bots that are exposed to you and harder, more, the difficulty is raised. You see these maps and their larger sizes and how they're constructed differently, and there's larger things, and it takes longer to get from one side to the other. It was just, it was crazy to see that. And for years, for decades, I sat there envisioning and imagining and hoping and dreaming what it would be like to have multiplayer, to play with more than 3 machines. I mean, it was just nuts, and I was overly obsessed, obviously. But another fun thing that was fun about me discovering the grid is starting to go online and search for other people that were as obsessed with the game that I was. And I came across three or four very important websites. The first one was made by who's my friend currently from Chicago named Patrick McCarran. He runs a website called trmk.org, which stands for the realm of Mortal Kombat.org. And he basically covered all the Midway games as he was mutual friends with Ed Boon and some of the developers, seeing that he grew up in Chicago. So he got all insider information from these guys, and he's actually credited when you beat the one-player game in the grid, not only do you get $100,000 added to your account, you get to see the credits. And as the credits are rolling, you'll see he's actually credited and thanked for Patrick McCarran in the development of it as he was a tester and did some other various things. Pat, love you, Pat. You're one of my favorite people on the planet. And you've been a big help for me and the information that I sought after for all these years. But you got that website. Then you got noob.com, which was Ed Boon's personal website, which he showed a lot of the grid stuff. And he had a link on it, which would go to thegridgame.com, which was the official grid website. And that website was fucking awesome because it gave you all the backstory, all the character talk, the whole nine. It gave you it all. It showed some codes on there, displayed tournaments, the whole thing. It even had the Chiller comic on there. Now, Chiller is a character in the game. And John Vogel, who contributed a lot of the art to the game, is the one who created this Chiller comic, which I'm missing pages. I only have pages, I think 1, 2, 3, and maybe 2 more, but I think there's 8 total pages and nobody's fucking got these pages. I've asked people for them, but when you go on the Wayback Machine and you try to revisit and find screenshots of these old websites, which I was thankfully able to find so I can close my eyes and relive those moments in these times in the early 2000s when I was surfing these websites, you could see some of it, but you can't find every page. So please, somebody give me these fucking Chiller comic pages because I want to make a fucking, an official book out of it, if you will. But that was another website. And then there was another one. It was called GamePL.com, which was basically stood for Game Planet. And it was run by a grid fanatic named DGX Shiny. Shout out to my boy Derek. I became friends with him years later. I'm actually talking to him the past couple weeks, gearing up for this episode. And he's, always been a help. But it was discovering his website that had a forum on it that really made me realize the presence of the grid in Florida and in the Chicagoland area. It's unprecedented how crazy those dudes were out there. And those were the 2 places that actually had 6-player grid machines. So it was almost a myth for me. I'm on these websites interacting with these dudes from other states and just seeing them playing on these 3 machines. It was in these 6 machines. It was crazy to me. I mean, nobody was playing on that shit in my area because we didn't have it. You'd be lucky if you found a spot that had 3. I've heard some people getting only fucking 2 or 1. It was just absolutely crazy. But going on those websites, going on those forums, finding that infamous Got Grid picture, which I turned into fucking stickers years later. That was found on the gridgame.com. But, it was a special time, a time when, like I told you, I got my computer when I was in 8th grade. That was when I started, really experiencing, those wonderful shooters. And that was when I got to start surfing the web for all these crazy codes and stuff. And when I discovered this community, this grid community, it made me feel like home because I couldn't really talk to many people around me besides the people that were playing the game with me. I needed more. When it comes to me, when I get into something, I really go down rabbit holes. And I needed to find out more about this game and just the secrets and stuff and the rumors that were going around. I mean, it was something that I can't really describe that feeling or capture and bottle that feeling that it was back then. But I remember going in that group and shout out to Shiny on the Game PL forum. He decided to make kind of like a high score ranking where you could take a picture with your cell phone. Back then we had the craziest fucking Sprint phones with the worst fucking cameras. They were like 2 megapixel cameras. And I would take pictures then, which I don't have any more of. I wish I did, of the original photos of what I would take. But you would take a picture of your user account and submit it to Shiny, and he would make and compile a list of the best scores around. And if you look at this, recently I was talking to him and he sent me the last screenshot that he had of it. And I only submitted something to him one time. And I was crazy to see my name on the list. So when I first started playing the grid, I was Chaos. And I'm number 21 on this list. And if you look, I'll show it up on the screen for those watching. You can see, if you scroll down the list to list 21, you could see that I'm there, Chaos. I got like 27,000 killed, whatever the case may be. But it was cool to just see that. I forgot that list even existed. But the fact that I was able to reconnect with Derek which is, AKA DGX Shiny. And see that, I was absolutely fucking blown away. It was such a throwback. And if you were around that time and you were a real grid fiend like I was, you were doing that stuff on the internet. So a little fun story about the grid is when I first started going there playing and I first started getting obsessed with the game. I guess you could say I kind of have a competitive nature about myself. And, I discovered the grid a little later than when it first got to Fun and Games. And when I got there and I started playing, I started noticing the high scoreboards, and obviously I wasn't on it. There was a couple of names that I remember from looking on the board. Was names Kobe, which is kind of like Kobe, but when I found out later his name was pronounced Kobe, and another guy OPP, which shout out to my guy Brian Pickler, who I'm friends with now after all these years, but I never met him back then. So I consider these guys the first generation grid players at Fun and Games. They were before me. It was a little short-lived. At least we never crossed paths. They were there and they ran it up right in the beginning and then died shortly after. Come to find out, this guy Kobe was really big into fighting games. He was very tall. I don't know how tall he actually was, but when I finally got to see what he looked like, he was kind of like a mythical creature to me in the beginning. Who's this guy Kobe? He's number one in the grid high scores. I want to take him out. Like, that was my goal. I need to take this guy out. He was pretty tall, long hair, glasses. Cats that went to Fun and Games know exactly who he is. If you have his contact info, please contact me. I'd love to bring him here and have him experience this because he was, at the time, the best. So I would see his name on the scoreboards all the time. And I'm like, I want to take this guy out. So after a while of me playing, getting my shit up and getting my skill up, I gained the courage to ask some people, who's this guy Kobe? I don't know who he is. I never met him before. And, they finally showed me that's him over there. So I gained the courage one day. I woke up to him and I'm like, hey, bro, you're Kobe? He's like, yeah. I was like, look, I want to play you in the grid. He's like, nah, I don't play that no more. He was like, oh, whatever. I'm like, nah, I really want to play. I want to see how good you are. I want to take you out. I was straight up. I was 16 years old. I'm like, I want to take you out. And he was like, listen, I don't play that anymore. If you want to play me, you got to pay for it. So I was like, all right, bet. So I get him. I put the coins in the machine, and him and I start playing. And I'm fucking him up. I don't know if it was because he hasn't played in a while, or I was just getting that nice, but I was fucking him up. That was my goal. That's what I wanted. I set a goal for myself, on top of me trying to obtain stuff within my user account. I wanted the top spot. I wanted the number one spot on the scoreboard. So I was fucking him up, and he's bitching and moaning, complaining about the controller's fucking up. Was it true? I don't know. Maybe it was fucking up. But to give him the credit, he hasn't played in a while, and I'm here. I'm playing all the time, getting real high level, and he hasn't played in a while. But it was just something that it was a personal feat that I had to overcome myself, and it was joyful beating Kobe that day, paying for it and beating him, and then he walked off and stormed off really nasty. But like I said, he was playing a lot of fighting games, so he wasn't even on that type of time at the time. But it was just something for me that I had to do for myself. But the other name was OPP, and I told you I never met him until later on in life, which I'll double back to. But that was one of the things that I had to accomplish was to beat this dude Kobe, and then, after I discovered it, we started playing it. A lot of other kids started getting really hip to it and playing it a lot. And then even a kid from my high school, shout out my boy Joe Gazzo, that's my homie. And through him, I met his cousins from Parsippany. And then through his cousins and their friends, and then they were going there and they were playing the game. So at that time, the grid started to gain a lot of popularity within Fun and Games. So you got, shout out to my guys, you got Gaz, my boy Gazza, right? My boy James June from Verona, from my side, he was playing. And then you got Joe's cousin, Mike Tranquiti, a.k.a. Bud. Then you got his fucking friends. You got Shauno, which his name in the grid was I'm High. Later on became Shauno, which is this fucking bug in here, which is a story that I'll talk about later. J-Palm the Bomb, he was in there. my boy, My Dick, sci-fi. Like it just started to grow. And this community at Fun and Games revolving around the grid just got so massive and so big. You really had, like, if you know type shit, you had to be there. It was, I can't describe I close my eyes and I take myself back to what it was like back then. And it was the most happiest I've ever been in my life. And we were all playing, and it got to a point where Kobe was long knocked out of the high scoreboards. And for a good amount of time, me and this kid, I'm high, my friend Sean, shout out my guy who never fucking comes here anymore. I don't know what happened, him and J-Palm, but me and Sean were always battling for 1 and 2 in the high scoreboards. And what was crazy about my boy Sean is back in the day, now everybody's a weed connoisseur. Everybody. You know that. Everybody knows all these strains. Now weed's legal. You could fucking drive down the street and go get whatever you want. Back in the day, it was not like that. You had to really know somebody to get some good Buddha. And Sean, this guy, and this group of people around the Parsippany area that I became friends with because of the kid I went to high school with, Joe Gazzo, these kids were elite. The tree they were getting was nothing. It was out of this world. It was otherworldly, and nobody around the area was getting it. So this kid, Sean, would smoke a lot. And that's why his grid name was I'm High. And he would absolutely obliterate people. But he had to be high. If he wasn't high, he was falling short. It was pretty funny. It was something that I always enjoyed laughing at, was if Sean did not smoke an L, he sucked in the fucking grid. It was absolutely hilarious. But this is when the grid got crazy. This is when J-Palm and Shauno put me on to bourbon fries. Now, to explain what that is, remember before I said if you went to Colello's Pizza, you copped a slice. If you went to Bourbon Chicken and you got some food, you could take your receipt, you could bring it to Fun and Games and get a free game. So Shauno and J-Palm loved going to Bourbon Chicken, which I loved. But they would get Bourbon Chicken, but they would get the fries, and they would smother the fries. Because back then, you go to Bourbon Chicken now, oh, do you want Bourbon Chicken? You have to ask for the bourbon sauce. They don't give it to you anymore. They used to keep it in a fucking metal container, a metal basin, and it would sit in there in case it dripped. You used to grab that container, and you used to be able to... You could put it all over your bourbon fries. We would eat it with a fork, my G. That shit was lovely. And those cats put me onto that shit. But we would go there for hours. Then I started to get friendly with them. 17 years old, I got my license. I would hang out in Parsippany. That's when I got introduced to the fucking glass blowers, to my boy Jordan Melito. That was when I developed like this Parsippany friendship. And then we were heavy in the grid. And I had a fucking 1997 fucking, I think it was a 97 Eclipse. It was like a purplish gray. I'd go down there and hang out, and we'd go up there and we'd play the fucking grid for hours, dude. And the grid was, dude, there was times where I was playing the grid in there and I got so good. Now remember, the grid was 50 cents to play. Okay? And when you're playing multiplayer, if you're first place and you win, the next round's free. There was times where I would play the grid literally almost 2 hours straight, couldn't get off the machine. Now, I'm going to put this into perspective, which is going to make that even more impressive. Everybody comes to my house and they play the grid, right? Game clock is the key. The stock game clock on the multiplayer of the grid. Now, when you play the grid and you enter a multiplayer match and you load it up, it shows 3 minutes. It's not actually 3 minutes. The game clock is much faster than that, and the match is really about a minute and a half. Now, the Midway team, the Mortal Kombat team, they're known for doing stuff in their games to make it harder or more they're kind of deceiving with the stuff, with the difficulty, with things like that. So the game clock on the actual multiplayer game is not, even though it shows 3 minutes, it counts much faster, and it's about a minute and a half. So I didn't realize that when I got my machines, you could go into the diagnostic thing and change it to real time. So whoever comes here and plays this shit is not like how I was playing it when I was a kid. The game clock was much faster back in the day, which made it even more impressive that I was able to sit. Now, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own ass. I'm just keeping it $1.50. That I would be able to sit in that machine for literally hour and a half, 2 hours on 50 cents, destroying. Now, another element that I want to explain to you right now is if you're too young or you weren't in the arcades around that time, this fucking fly is unbelievable, huh? Sancocho. Anyway, if you weren't in the arcades around that time, there's a phrase called put your quarter up. Now, you know what that is? If you want next in an arcade game, you had to literally grab a quarter in your pocket and put your quarter up. And what that would essentially do was hold your place in line. And what was funny about putting your quarter up is nobody was writing their name in marker on their quarter, but everybody knew which quarter was theirs. And that just essentially meant you got next. So when when you put a quarter up on that cabinet and that person lost, they'd get the fuck out of Dodge, and whoever's quarter was the most left out, they were next up. And that's how you waited. Now, when I was on my run, when I was in my prime and I was getting it in, you look at my cabinet, there might be 2 or 3 quarters. You look on the other 2 cabinets, because we only had a 3 set, filled to the brim. That's how it was. I was getting gully. Same with Shauno, same with a bunch of other cats. We were all pretty high-level players, and we were just getting it in. And there was a long period of time we were just playing and playing and playing. I'm going to tell you a fucking real crazy story about when I was playing the grid, and this kind of brings the whole fun and game story full circle with how dangerous it was, as well as, it taught you life lessons and things of that nature. I almost got pickpocketed playing the grid. So here I am, I'm playing the grid. If there's 3 cabinets, I'm on the machine most to the left. I remember it being almost the winter time because I was wearing a Bubble Goose sweatpants. I was big sweatpants in high school, sweat hard. I had the academics and Nietzsche. I had every Rockaware, every sweat outfit you could think of I had, but I also had a Bubble Goose on. I was big in the North Faccio, first down, all that stuff. And I'm wearing a Bubble Goose, and there's a kid from Patterson, a Spanish kid, next to me. Now, when you play the grid, anybody that has ever played, how do you obtain weapons? You just run into them. It's like any other game. The weapon is sitting in its place, spinning. You run into it. That's how you obtain it. So how I knew he was full of shit was this kid was next to me. He said, yo, how you get all them cool weapons? Now, I told you, this place developed street smarts within me. Obviously, he knows how I'm getting these weapons. So now red flags are going off in my head. He's asking me these questions because he's scheming. And I know, like, I'm playing the game, demolishing, by the way, while I'm having this conversation with this puñeta. I'm demolishing the game, fucking everybody up out here. And he's asking me these questions, and these red flags are going off. I'm like, yo, what's this guy trying to fucking tell me? He's like, yo, how you get the money? Yo, how you get the money, yo? He's looking. All of a sudden, man, I start feeling something funny on my side. Feeling something funny. So I see, as he's asking me these questions, he's leaning. He's leaning into me. But since we both got Bubble Gooses on, a little tough. But I start to feel something in my pocket. And my pockets were sagging. You remember, this is 2001, 2002. We were wearing big clothes, triple X tees, and big sweats. And this cat, he's taking his fingers and he's going like this, trying to get into my fucking sweatpants. And as I'm playing, I look and I feel it. Bang! I hit his fucking hand with, what the fuck you doing, fam? I was like, were you trying to fucking rob me? What does he say? Of course. No, what you mean? I don't need your money, motherfucker. What you talking about? Why you acting crazy? I got money, motherfucker. I got money. N-bomb, the whole 9. I got money. I'm good. Mind you, while he's saying this shit to me, while I'm arguing with him, I still got my hand on the stick, still got my hand on the trackball. I'm still demolishing. Still demolishing, by the way. He gets all offended, says, nah, I would never try to take your money, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? N-bomb, and he gets out of Dodge. I finish the game, don't chase him, Finish the game, fuck everybody up. I know I got like 30, 40 seconds before the next match starts. I run outside to go find him. He was gone. But that just goes to show you the kind of place Fun and Games was. And if I didn't go there and frequent there and develop my street smarts of hanging out in Patterson where my mother grew up and where my cousin still lives to this day, if I wasn't around those environments and Fun and Games, it gave you grit, man. It gave you a little, it showed you a little street smarts. And, when he's asking me questions, red flags go up. Now my senses, my every nerve ending's on, it's firing off. Now I know this cat's trying to be funny style. So it was kind of, the grid has put me through a lot, even trying to get pickpocketed. So that was kind of one of the funny things that happened to me during the game. But that wasn't the only thing. I mean, dude, I would beat kids' ass in that fucking game. Kids have gotten in my face while playing the game. You're too fucking good at this. Stop fucking playing. Get the fuck off the machine. Fuck you. Yeah, not kidding. Kids punching the fucking, because most arcade games sometimes it's either glass or plexi that's covering the CRT. Motherfuckers punching that shit, getting mad, trying to fucking rip the joystick out the fucking control stand. Dude, I'm talking wild shit that I've been through playing the fucking grid. It's a fucking video game, right? But when it comes to video games, people get, they're sore losers, they do this, and people have gotten in my face playing that game, just accusing me of wild shit. It was a fucking crazy battle. You know what I mean? And anyhow, after I graduated high school, so I was supposed to graduate in 2004. I ended up graduating in 2005 due to some attendance issues, the whole fucking kit and caboodle, right? That's when the arcade industry really started taking a dive. And, Fun and Games, unfortunately, ended up closing down in 2007 permanently. So since I graduated in 2005, after I graduated, I was really into music and I wanted to be, go into music production. So I ended up going to the Institute of Audio Research. And around that time, man, I stopped going to the arcade. 2005. So I stopped 2004. So I stopped for a while. I go to school. I came back to the grid for a little bit. Now that my absence from the grid was about a year, when I came back, a whole new generation of grid players started popping up. And there's two players in specific that I specifically remember, not because of only their names, which yes, they stood out, but their skill level, they were pretty good. There was a kid named Oz who ended up being a real sourpuss, and another kid named Jason, Jason. And those kids, when I came back to play, I was a little rusty, I haven't played for a while, and the crowd started building again at the grid. And it was weird because one of the main reasons why I left the grid is the crowd started to die down and nobody started to play anymore. Once the crowd started leaving Fun and Games. But at its height, there'd be 20 people around the grid. I wish I had pictures from this time. There'd be 20 people around the quarter era that I was telling you about. There'd be people, massive people, and you begin screaming, people going crazy over the game. And then once it started to die down is when I left. When I came back to revisit a couple times, I remember seeing, those kids. Now, when I first started the grid, my name was Chaos in the grid. That was my name. I mentioned before, my friend Shauno's name was I'm High in the grid. That was his username. And my other friend Jerry's name was My Dick. Okay. Those two names single-handedly fucked up all of our user accounts in the grid, and I'm going to explain why. So Fun and Games was really big on being a family arcade, a family entity. And with names like I'm High and My Dick, the people that ran the place wouldn't let it fly. And they started seeing all those names pop up. I guess parents were complaining. They reset the fucking machine, and we all had to start from the bottom. Restart. Dude, I'm talking, I beat the one-player game 20-something times. I had the crown. I was number one on the high scoreboard. So when that happened, that was a very discouraging period of my life. And that was kind of aligned around the same time when I left the grid and I stopped playing. And, that was when I left high school. I got into, audio school and all that. And, I changed my name from that point on, and that's when I did Bozak, which is actually my name here in the house. My name is damn fly. My name is Bozak now. But that was the defining moment because of that. So since I left that, when I came back, there was a whole new generation. That was when I told you about those kids Oz and stuff. But that one thing about that kid Oz is even though I'd love to see those kids now, bring him here so they can have fun here. That kid Oz I would see him try to fucking break that joystick so bad, like all the fucking time. Like he would literally grab this fucking joystick and fucking try to fucking break it off the thing, and it was crazy. If any motherfucker ever tried that at my house, they're leaving it in a fucking body bag. I'll promise you that. You ain't fucking grabbing my shit trying to break it like that. But he was a typical, sore loser type kid. But after that, I came back, noticed there was new competition. I was like, you know what? I don't know. I think it's just, too much was going on in my life. My mom got real sick. She started to get cancer, and I was attending audio school at the time. So I kind of fell out, and I fell into a big drug fucking binge. And I started, if you listen to the episode 1 of my podcast, I talk all about that, previous drug addiction I had. And life got a little hairy at that point. My mom was real sick. She had cancer. So I'm like battling that, go to school. I graduate school because it was only a 13-month audio school program. What do? I either have to intern or what, but I couldn't work for free. So I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to do it. So I never got to pursue my audio career that I wanted to. And, life got a little hairy from that point on, And at the same time, when that stuff was going on, my mom passed away in 2009. And in 2007 is when Fun and Games shut down forever. And I was so out of the loop that I'll show some video now, luckily because of this one YouTuber. Ended up, there was an auction there, and they auctioned off all the games, including the grid. And this guy on YouTube luckily filmed the auction, like completely. So I'll throw some clips up there now of that. But it was a sad time. And like when Fun and Games shut down, it took a piece of my heart. It ripped it out of my chest, threw it on the ground, shat on it, and just stomped it out. And I didn't realize at the time like how it affected me, but it definitely did, because it's like, not only do I not have a place anymore that me and every other North Jersey kid could go to be ourselves, to be accepted, to feel like family. But now those games that we loved are gone forever. Because Broadway City Arcade in the city that I mentioned before, that was gone. Electric Circuit was gone in Bloomfield. They all started dying. Now this is pre-Dave Buster's, all that shit. Arcade would have a resurgence years later. But at the time, it was dead. The home console shit got crazy. In 2007 is when Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare came out, and I was all in. When that came out, I was removed from Fun and Games. It shut down. That's all I had. So it's kind of like I jumped from the grid right to that game, and it was fucking unbelievable. What I loved about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was it was fairly fast-paced. I was able to still play with friends. Obviously, it was online, but I was still able to play with friends, have a headset and the whole thing. And it checked a lot of boxes for me, and I fell all the way in. I loved Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. It was fucking absolutely magical. And I that's what I did from that point on, and I who knew what was going to happen, what was going to come. And at the same time, when I was having a good time playing this, I was absolutely devastated. Everybody started to grow up. Things changed. People went to school, started getting careers, and just, with Fun and Games gone forever and all the arcades just no longer there. All those games that we loved, all those memories started to leave a lot of our minds forever, But not mine. It took a temporary hiatus. But a person like me, a hyper-obsessive, hyper-focused individual, it never left my mind. It took a little hiatus. So between that point 2007 and 2016, a lot changed in my life. My mom ends up dying in 2009. I'm clueless. I don't know where I want to go in life. I don't know where I want to work. I'm a complete basket case, really. I was in a rough rut, And even with all that going on, never forgot about the grid. Never forgot about it. I would think about it periodically and think. And, during that time from 2009 to 2016, I always tried to keep the grid alive within my heart. So I would just search all the time. Now, I've been a member of eBay since the year 2000. And I got hip to saving searches. So I would do that. And I would always save like the Grid Arcade, the Grid, stuff like that, just to hope things would pop up. Because there's something in the back of my mind told me one day you're going to own the Grid. Or at least I was hopeful that one day I would own the Grid. So I would just sit there and think about it and think about it and find searches. And stuff started to pop up, and I started to, I started to obtain actual items from, the Grid. I started to acquire certain items. And I acquired a couple different things in those years. I acquired a non-working grid board for dirt cheap. I paid like $30 for it. Why it was non-working, I have no idea. I wouldn't even have a JAMA hookup to figure out why it's not working. But I bought it anyway because something told me you're going to need this one day. I don't know. It's weird. It's like the heavens were speaking through me spiritually and guiding my hands and guiding my mind and eyes. So I got that. I got an Exotica board. Now, the reason I got the Exotica board is during this time period when I'm doing research on the Grid and I'm trying to remember it and find any info that I can on the game, I come across that there's a theory that the Exotica board, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, Exotica, there's a game called Cruisin' Exotica. And that was one of Midway's last arcade games. Now, if you remember Mortal Kombat 4, which has kind of similar graphics to the Grid, not really. That was on Zeus hardware, but it was a Zeus 1 board. The Grid was Zeus 2 hardware. That's why it's a little better graphically and it's a little smoother. The only other game that ran on Zeus 2 hardware was Cruisin' Exotica. So the theory on the internet at the time, before we had all this education and knowledge, was that you could theoretically swap chips from the PCB board from a Grid board to an Exotica board, and it works. Not the case technically. It is true to an extent, but there's a couple things that you have to do to make it worthwhile. But the fact that I just saw that, I said to myself, let me just get one just in case, and then I'll figure it out later on, see if maybe I could do something else with it. So I got that. A user manual for the arcade machine came up. Grab that. A single U12 1.2 chip came up. Now, I told you there's an upgrade from 1.0 to 1.2. The 1.2 upgrade requires 4 chips, but one singular chip came up for sale, so I bought it. I don't know. I was just going haywire. So I bought the 2 boards. I bought that chip. A promotional poster came up for sale. Grab that. And a promotional t-shirt. Now, the t-shirt's very rare. I've only probably seen 3 or 4 go up for sale during my entire time, and 2 of them are mine. I have a medium and I have like an XL. The other one I got later on, the medium I got or whatever at this time, and it's super minty. And the only way you could get promotional t-shirt was, if I'm correct, in Chicago, they held some at the Brunswick Gala West, like a bowling alley. They held a Grid tournament during the early testing phases of this game when it first came out, something like that. And if you attended and you entered, you got a free Grid t-shirt. There was another thing where in the Grid Attract mode, there was an address that came up with the host, and there's a whole. I'll play it during this if you want, if you could hear it. It talks the whole, 718 Roscoe, the Chicagoland area, 70718, blah, 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 whatever. It does the whole zip code and all that. And if you send a postcard to that address, they would either send you like a poster or maybe a shirt. So that was like one of the things that I obtained that was very rare. And I'm basically actually wearing the shirt right now. The only thing is I had these made, and I made it to specifications of the original shirt, so it looks almost identical. It's almost the same exact green, and you can't see it now, but on the back, there's like a grid logo. But I made these on purpose so that I could wear them because I don't want to wear the real ones, and I don't want to ruin them. So this is actually an imitation, even though it looks pretty real. But that was another one of the items that I got, plus the rare poster. Because I had the foresight. Like I knew like one day I'm going to own the grid. And I need to just prepare myself for that day. It's weird. It was like a woman's intuition. You know what I mean? So fast forward to December 20th, 2016. I'm on eBay and I get an email notification. 2 grid machines come up for sale. Now, at the time, I just started my career in a sense. I got hired with New Jersey Transit in 2012, right? Hated the department I was in. I was trying to become a train conductor, which I am now. I ended up transferring over there in 2014. So I already had my career kind of established. My mom passed away in 2009, so I started living with my father immediately because I had nowhere else to go. My father lived in Lodi, New Jersey, and it was a weird place where he lived. He lived above a pizzeria and a liquor store. And there was 3 apartments in this strip mall. But it was weird because my dad's apartment was directly in the middle, and it was almost like you took 2 apartments and combined them into one. The studio was massive. And then there was these 2 smaller apartments on either side of my father's. My father took apart like, if you looked on the outside, I believe there was like 4 sets of windows, and like 2 of them were my dad's sets. It was really big. So I moved in there with my dad. Moving there, I end up meeting my now wife. I guess we started dating in 2011, a year after or a couple years after I moved in with my father. We dated for a while, then she moves in. So then she was living in there for a minute. And it was still pretty roomy. Like it was a big place. My wife was at the time just living with me. And we're in there and I'm living and this notification comes up. So I'm already with transit a couple years, 3-4 years. And I'm on eBay and 2 machines pop up for sale. 2 of them. And they're from the Illinois area, Chicago, somewhere over there. 2 machines. And it's up for bid. Now, at the time, I didn't have the coin for it. I forget I think the guy had them listed for like 900 something. I don't know what it was, whatever it was. And I'm an eBay sniper, so I wait till the very last minute to start bidding on shit, right? So I'm waiting. I don't have the money. My boy, Johnny Red, shout out my boy, Johnny Red. He was doing really well for himself at the time, which he still is now. But he had a fucking warehouse in which he employed a bunch of my friends to run for him, and he sold and resold sneakers and clothing. And he had like $2 million in product. This dude always found a way to make money, and he always had coin, always. So I knew like if I was ever in a jam and I really needed money, he'd help me out. So I had that in the back of my mind. And then these things go up for sale, and I'm just like, okay, I don't even have my own house at this point. I'm living with my father. I'm like, I wonder if my dad would even though we had the room, it's still his crib. It's not mine. So I would have to ask for it. But something in the back of my mind told me I'm going to be able to do this anyway. Let me just go for it. And I fucking went for it. And I bid, I sniped, and I got these 2 machines in 2016, in December 2016, for $1,025. I win the auction. So now after I win the auction, I'm like, fuck, I finally am going to be able to own my favorite arcade machine of all time, something that I never thought I'd be able to play ever again. 2 of these machines. But how the fuck am I going to convince my dad to let me have them in the apartment? But also, how am I going to get the money? Contact Johnny Red, yo. Can you do me a favor? Can you front me the money? I'll pay you back soon. That was easy. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll send it to you. I talked to my dad. I thought it was going to be tough. So I really got to give a shout out to my dad. None of this right now, all the stuff that I do, the grid parties that I have, none of this would have been possible without you. And I thank you. I really do. I love you. And you believed in me and you made this possible. And he agreed. And he was like, yeah, sure, I don't mind if you put him in. I had it all planned out. So when I present a plan to my father, I have to have everything laid out. A place where they could go, why they could go there, etc. And there was one wall that I knew they'd be fine. And he was like, all right, fine. So I order these things. This guy sends me videos of the machines, shows me they're in their working condition. Very nice guy. I forget his name. I'd have to look it up. I think his name was Rich or something. I don't know. He was a super nice guy. Now, mind you, I've never owned an arcade machine my entire life. Ever. I have never owned an arcade machine. If this thing's broken, if a part needs to get fixed, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. But I didn't care. This was the time it felt right. So I talked my dad into it. These things come. It comes in the winter, so I get them in January. So I win the auction in December. The arcade machines come in January of 2017. Now, my dad lived above a pizzeria. I told you there was a set of like 30 fucking steps. These fucking poor guys come off the truck. They're bringing them up all the way, and they bring them in. It's all saran wrapped. I take them out, and from this point forward, those 2 machines, which are right here to the left of me. Let me see if you can see in this video. This machine and this one. These 2 right here. You can only really see me put my hand on one of them. These 2 machines single-handedly changed everything for me. And after they came in is when this whole journey really starts, is when I get these 2 machines. In the beginning, I fired them up. They looked okay. They were all right. Joysticks felt okay. Like they were all right. They were all right. Something starts happening like after I first have them where they start clicking off, like glitching and knocking off. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So now I open the back of these things. Bro, I was so lost because I've never had an arcade machine. I had to ask this guy, like, how do I even open the control panel? Like he had to give me the arcade owning basics, like how to go up through the control, the coin door to unlock the hinges, to open the control panel, to get underneath. Like, I didn't know. You got to remember, I've never owned an arcade machine. It's a totally different world than owning a fucking console. So I did not know anything of what I was doing. So I start learning this stuff and I start seeing that there's something going on with my machine, of course. But, I'm thankful that something happened to these machines, because I would have never learned and I would have never have been able to become what I became if it wasn't for this difficulty that was thrown my way. And what happened is these machines started knocking off. Now, to be quick with this, all these machines are linked together, right? So you got the PCB board that's basically screwed into the side of the back of the cabinet on the side wall. And what sucks about the design of these PCBs is the firewire ports that link them to each other are on the top of the PCB board. So that means you got to take the firewire cable, connect them to the top of the board. Then they basically have to curl up, go out the back to the next machine, and go back up top again. If somebody kicks that fucking wire, it's going to pull that entire FireWire 400 port off the board. And that's what happens a lot. If you look up online, like I said, it's a Zeus 2 board. So it's a Cruisin' Exotica or Grid. Only 2 games that use the same Athens Zeus board. You look at the fucking thing, a lot of them are missing one of the firewire ports, or they're janky because of that, because you move them or you kick the fucking wire in the back, it fucking pulls it out. It should have been designed on the bottom where it would just pull out of the side. So it comes to happen that one of my boards, I think it was this machine, it had the 2 ports, obviously, because it wouldn't be able to connect the other. And the other one that it was connected to, there's only one port. And the only port that was left was really fucked up. I even have a picture of it. It was just, the connector was fucked up and all that. So now this is where my other 2 boards come into play. So I contact Leo of Digital Press. Shout out, if you grew up in Clifton or whatever the case may be, you got to know what Digital Press is. And he has some experience with arcade boards. So I tell him the situation. He comes over, thinks he could help me. Even though he didn't help me in this part, he kind of made my situation a little worse. He taught me a lot about my machine, how things work. So I was able to learn from him at the same time. And what happened is the goal was for him to take one of the firewire ports from a working board and swap it with the one on the bad board so that I can connect them. But during this process, he wasn't able to accomplish it, and it ended up like fucking frying the board, and I couldn't get it to work again. So now I'm thinking, I just spent $1,000, which is nothing compared to what these machines are worth now. $1,000, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm completely lost. I don't know how to fix these things. Now I got these paperweights in my house. Well, one, because the one board don't work. You can't find these boards anywhere because the game's so rare. You can't find parts for these things. What am I to do? So I go online. I start searching. Thank God for the internet. I find a guy named Mike Yosha. Shout out to my guy, Mike Yosha, who is known for working on Midway specific boards because he used to work at Midway, I believe. Find him, contact him, give him my situation. He lists on his website all the boards that he works on. Cruising Exotica is one of them, and Grid is not. So he was a little apprehensive to work with me at first. I tell him the situation, whatever. I'm like, look, I got a non-working board. I got an Exotica board with a missing thing. I got this board. I'm going to send you all 3 boards. Please send me back one working one. Send it to him. Don't hear from him for months. I'm like, what's going on? Blah, blah. He says he can't do it. Now, remember, I told you before, theoretically, you can swap the stuff from an Exotica board to a Grid board because it uses the same hardware. It was only in theory online, but it wasn't until I actually did it myself with this guy that we found out how it's possible. Now, other people would discover other methods later on. Shout out Jen, Dragon Minded. But at this point in time, in 2017, it hasn't been done yet. So I sent it to him, and he's not hopeful. He's giving me he's hitting me back like, I don't know what to do, this and that. I'm like, oh man, there's no way, whatever. So he figures it out. Theoretically, you could take all the game chips and swap them to the Exotica board. But there's 2 other chips that are very important. There's a security chip. It's like in the bottom middle or bottom right. That has to get swapped to the new board. But more importantly is the BIOS chip. I believe it's called U29. And this chip isn't a plug and play. It's a soldered fucking chip. It's an Altera chip. It's not easy to do. And this is the one that he figures out has to get swapped. So he was able to take my 3 boards, make one beautifully working board out of it with 2 functional Firewire 400 chips. That makes these things fire up. Send it back, and then include all the other EEPROMs, version 1.0, whatever, all the EEPROMs that were extra, and give them back to me. And it's because of Mike Yosha that he really helped jumpstart my journey. That fixed it up, and then from that point on, that's when I would learn everything else with the Grid. That's when I would learn about monitor chassis. I have no idea. Flybacks. I don't know how to make these CRTs look crispy, because when I got them, the picture was shit. So I find out that when you open the coin door, there's a little thing under there that could adjust the brightness, sharpness, vertical, horizontal, stuff like that. But that's only half the battle. On the actual back of the monitor is the monitor chassis, where you can change the RGB colors, RGBV colors, and then on the flyback is where you can do the sharpness and all that. So it's like all this stuff that I fucking found out. It's like it's all because I had these two machines right here. These two machines helped me really learn these machines in and out. And now I know every fucking thing there is to know about these machines. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't get these faulty cabinets and then learn from the ground up. So that was basically the first step into me really learning the grid, learning about them. And thanks to Mike Yosha for saving me that time, it ended up helping me out. Now, obviously, the goal that I had was I want to have my friends play this game and never have to worry about playing the grid ever again. Because like I said, we all thought we'd never play this game ever again. We thought it was gone forever. I mean, at least I did. But the fact that I have this now, it's like I can make that dream come true for all of us. And I just, my goal shifted to not only being able to let my friends know that playing the grid, you'll never have to worry again. You'll be able to do it forever. But to bring that sense of community back, to be able to capture that feeling we had at fun and games, to recreate that environment was like the ultimate goal for me. And now it seemed closer than ever. And that's when the journey really, really started. That's when it really started. And I didn't have anybody come over in the beginning to play because when you play with two, it's not fun. It's tit for tat. You need at least three. I mean, three is what I grew up playing on. So I had a couple of friends come over at first. I had Steve Zepp and Joe Hop. And they were the ones, the first time they came was much different than the second time they came. So when they first came, I just get these things up and running, but I don't know how to adjust the monitors yet. The monitor still was a little shitty. So they came over, played, had a little fun. My cousin, Louis, came over. He played a little bit. My wife and my father-in-law, Mr. Rivera, Jimmy Rivera. He came over and he played. But, it wasn't quite there yet. Once I started learning how to adjust the monitor and stuff, started to learn the machine more, its mechanics and stuff like that, and how to make it look crispy, they came back over the next time. And Joe Hobb even knew. He's like, oh, this looks really fucking crazy. Now it's on par. Now it looks fire. So my goal was to get them in tip-top shape first, right? But then my life goes through a whirlwind after this point. So now I get married in 2017. Okay? I get my house in 2018. And I have my son in 2019. All at the same time. In the year 2015, which is a little more, I got to backtrack a little bit. I start my own company. I start a side business called Pinhead Co. Now, what Pinhead Co. essentially is the pin game started getting crazy, and I caught on to it. And I originally started a little label with my buddy Steve Zepp called Feral Goods. We made shirts. We sold a pin or two, and then our ideas just kind of clash. So we separated, and I did Pinhead Co. because I wanted to carry out my ideas that I had for Feral Goods that he wasn't really into. And I ended up doing Pinhead Co. And through that, I got to really know how to market myself, learn what it's like to create things from the ground up, design things. I started working with factories in China in firsthand. So this is kind of what built my creative nature. It kind of built my business nature, my business savviness and things like that. It kind of snowballed into a lot of things, but creating Pinhead Co. taught me a lot, and it kind of helped me do what I do now today. And it was another step in my ladder of life, if you will. So I started that, and I decided to make my first grid-related pin merch. So within that first couple of years of me getting the cabinets, I decided I wanted to make my first grid merch. Because you remember, this game didn't last that long. It came out in 2000. Arcade industry started dying around the same time. They never really came out with grid merch. Never. And it never hit consoles. It was supposed to. There's Dreamcast Mag. I own almost every publication that has the grid in it. Replay Magazine, Dreamcast Mag, a couple of Game Pros. There's things like that. The grid was featured in little articles, and it was supposed to come out on Dreamcast, and it was supposed to come out on Xbox Live Arcade. So later on, when I talked to Mike, which I'll go back to, he ends up telling me that Microsoft owns the software rights to the grid. since WB bought all the IP for Midway, they own the IP rights for the grid. And then Chicago Coin owns the hardware rights for the grid. So it's kind of a complicated web, but Microsoft ended up buying the rights for it to make it and put it out in Xbox Live Arcade, but I guess they just weren't able to replicate the technology at the time, and they weren't able to convert it to that. Now they could probably do it with ease, but at the time they were trying to make it work, and it just wasn't working out for them. So this was supposed to come out on consoles, but it never did. So at this time, since none of this stuff came out, they never came out with these on consoles. Merch was never created. I started to plant seeds within myself. I want to start making grid-related merch. So I made these grid logo pins. Now, over the years, I had a folder called the grid folder, and I collected any sort of imagery regarding the grid, any sort of information, coding. Like I had a folder with all this grid stuff, videos, sounds, whatever I could find for the game, I had it in there. And luckily, because of that, I was able to get that old school grid pattern that would scroll during the the advert screens and stuff like that. So that helped me make the background for it. And I thought it was a really cool design card. I was able to have Burrito Breath, shout out to Burrito Breath, my boy Phil Guy, make the grid logo say Pinhead Co., which is my logo. And then I was able to find a company that made this. I had a high attention to detail for cardstock and loved cardstock. And I wanted these big, like high level point cardstocks that were very thick and nice. And I found this company that was manufacturing the card backings for me, but they were able to dye the edges. So instead of them, they were this thick. Instead of them being white, they could be green. Now, if you look at the grid right here, there's like a green, like a pistachio green tea molding. And that's what I made the edge of the card for, which I'll throw some pictures up there for you. And I made the grid logo. I made a gold one and a silver one. And I mostly made it for when I have these parties later on, because I had that vision that I would hand them out to my friends, but I would also throw them on the internet, and whoever loves the grid that could appreciate it, if it's 2 people, that'll make me happy. So I threw them up on my website, and that's what I made. That was the first piece of merch that I ever made for the grid. And, through that, I meet a guy named Dan Jawadjis, who's this Portuguese dude from Chicago, and he ends up buying the grid pin from me. Now, what's funny about this situation is he was a video game guy. Now, this guy on itself, if you go to his Twitter, I'm pretty sure it's like at Dan Jawadjis on Twitter, which is GEWARGIS, but since he's Portuguese, I think it's pronounced Jawadjis, whatever. If you go on his thing, this guy is a mastermind programmer. He's such an innovative guy. He's one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. He creates all these weird things. Like he has this Sega Naomi tower. Well, if you know what a Sega Naomi is, it's an arcade, whatever. I don't want to get into what that is, but he's got like 7 or 10 of them like hooked up once so you could do multiplayer. He's got like this virtual reality fucking simulator in his house where you could ride in a Star Wars. Like, it's crazy. He's got pinball machines, and he's always creating all these things to make multiplayer so you can play with each other and network. He's like a mastermind networker. So he ends up, I guess, simultaneously before buying my grid pin, he goes to the Galloping Ghost arcade, which is run by Doc Mack. Shout out to my man Doc Mack, who has a full 6 set there. Since he's from Chicago, he goes there and he plays the grid there for the first time. I guess he didn't know that it existed prior, and he plays it and likes it, starts doing research on it, ends up finding a cabinet in Chicago at some guy's basically yard sale, who I guess worked for Midway or something, because he gets a poster there and he buys the cabinet off him, which ended up being almost like a development / test cabinet for the grid. So, Dan is another hyper-focused, obsessive guy like I am. And I guess he starts doing for the grid. And I guess through the algorithm in Google, he found my website and bought a pin off me. Now, when anybody buys grid-related merchandise off me, I automatically have to just send them an email, thank them, and hear their grid story. And that's how I met this dude, Dan, saw all this incredible crazy, innovative video game mayhem, that world that he created for himself. And that's how him and I got close. So after him and I got close, you know, my life spirals out. Like I tell you, 2017, I got married, like I mentioned previously, bought the house. In 2018, 2019, I have a kid. And then, of course, 2020, the year after that, pandemic hits. So my grid projects and stuff kind of went on the back burner for that entire block of time until 2001. And during this time, I get super obsessed with the grid. Like, because I have this dream in the back of my head. I want to get that third cabinet. I don't know what, but I'm going crazy. And I start surfing the internet for hashtags, forums, just to see somebody talking about the grid, something, just somebody doing something. And I'm surfing grid hashtags, and I come across this Instagram called, I believe it was called Perfect DJ Entertainment. So this post was of a kid named John Chimento, Italian kid from Brooklyn. And he owns this DJ company called Perfect DJ Entertainment. But when I was searching the hashtag, it's just a post of a grid cabinet with no topper, one single cabinet, and it looked like it was in a warehouse in a corner, and he's playing on it. So I messaged him. Like, bro, the grid's my favorite, blah, blah, blah. You know, I start doing the whole thing, getting over, and he's like, oh, it's my favorite game too. And bro, he told me something crazy. He tells me he's got 14 grid cabinets. Now, I'm not going to lie. I thought he was capping heavy. I'm like, there's no way somebody, especially, now, mind you, he's young, okay? He was born in 93. So right now he's in his early 30s. I'm about to hit 40. So he's like significantly, you know, some years younger than me. I'm like, so at the time, this is like fucking, you know, a long time ago. This isn't, you know, years ago. I'm like, there's no way this dude has 14 fucking cabinets. There's no way. I call cap, but whatever. I'm not going to call him a liar. So I just started talking to him, and then we're talking about the grid and how he likes it and this and that. And he keeps telling me, I got 14 cabinets. So I'm like, all right, if you got 14, I wanna buy some off you, because I eventually want to have a 3 set. You know, I'm talking about the whole thing. And he was all about it. He's like, okay, you know, I plan on selling them one day. I've been collecting them for years because it's the rarest game of all time, which it's not. It's one of them, but it's not the rarest. But in his eyes, it was the rarest of all time. And he's like, I want to, you know, one day, you know, sell them all. I know what they're worth. You know, I've been collecting them because he's kind of like, if you know John, you know he's a very intelligent kid, and you know he's a hard worker. He's one of the hardest working kids that I've ever fucking met in my life. Seeing this DJ business that he's built from the ground up by himself, he's a fucking entrepreneur, and the kid is bright. He knows what he's doing, and he just goes for it. You know what I mean? There's no like, he goes for it. He's always moving forward. So I knew that about him. I could tell by talking about it. He was about his business, but it was still a little far-fetched. And the fact that he hasn't sent me pictures of the 14 cabinets, I'm like, there's no way he has 14. And it's such a niche game. And for somebody to own 14 of something's a little fucking wild, especially knowing the size of these things, right? But he claims he had it in his warehouse. So we talked from time to time. And over the years, I would always tell him, you know, until 2020, I thought, I'm going to buy one, this and that, bullshit. You know, he probably thought I was bullshitting. So we were talking all the time. And then, you know, one day, after all this is going on, I get my house, I get married, I have my kid, pandemic happens. June of 2020, something crazy happens. So I'm on Facebook Marketplace. I'm messing around in June of 2020. And boom. 14 grid cabinets comes up for sale for $20,000 with pictures. And I see who posted it. Who the fuck posted it? John Chimento from fucking Brooklyn, New York. So what do I immediately do? I hit him up. What the fuck? You kidding me? Why are you putting them for sale? I told you I wanted them. And of course, what does he say to me? You were bullshitting me, which he's right. I was fucking playing him out. Not playing him out, but like I was bullshitting him for a little. I really had the intention, but I didn't have the money, so we were going out. But now I go in a deep panic mode because these games are so rare. You never see them up for sale, ever see them up for sale. And all of a sudden, 14 of them come. So, of course, it shoots the arcade community in a fucking frenzy to see this many of those rare games in one spot. People start going ballistic, throwing him offers from all over the fucking state, from other countries. But it's not that easy. It's 14 cabinets. You know how much that would cost to ship that shit via freight? It's like insane. So now I'm in a frenzy. Now, who else sees it? My buddy Dan Georgis in Chicago. So now we start conversing, and he starts seeing it, and he's going nuts. Now he's emailing him, trying to offer him money. Now I'm in a panic. I'm thinking I'm never going to see this shit ever again. And I'm not going to get the cabinets that I want. There's no way. Like I got to figure something out. Right. So I try negotiating with John first. First, I start telling him, look, I know you're getting these offers, but wouldn't you rather these things go in a home that not only would deserve them to be in, but places that are a little closer by and people that are not going to pay money and throw chargebacks, this and that. So we start talking. He agrees to it. We negotiate a deal. Now, mind you, I still don't have my shit. I still don't have my cabinets. But I'm trying to help my friend Dan get his 5 or 6 so he could have a full 6 set because he's got a lot of arcade machines. He works for Motorola. He does well for himself. He's got some coin and he's got the space. He was going to be building his new house at the time. And we negotiate this deal. And we arrange for Dan to come down to meet with John because at this point, John takes all these machines that he's got and his now wife, but at the time was his girlfriend, has a house. She lives in Rochelle, New Jersey. So he moves all his cabinets out of the warehouse because he's closing that warehouse down and he brings it all down there. So they're all in New Jersey now. So they're even closer to me. So I know John really wants to sell them, but he wants them to go in good homes. And I know Dan really wants them. So I'm trying to do Dan a service. I'm trying to help him out. So I'm talking to John behind the scenes, trying to convince him, to sell them to him. Even though I still need some, at the time, he wanted some coin for them, which now is really a drop in the bucket compared to what they're actually worth. But, this is just all, it's all time relative. And so we organize a deal where Dan is going to come down one time, see the machines in person, talk, they'll negotiate, make a deal. I'll meet Dan for the first time in person. And then Dan will go back to Chicago, come back again a couple months later, rummage through the stuff, pick which ones he wants for himself, get him shipped back to Chicago. He'll fly back, and then they'll be delivered to his house. While all this is going on, Dan comes down the first time. I'm with him. I introduce him to John. I meet John. We all talk. We have a good time. He does that. I didn't make a deal with John yet. I'm still a little on the edge. Dan goes back to Chicago. So between the time that Dan goes back to Chicago and the time he comes back the second time, I find my third grid machine on Offer Up. Now, I know you all know that fucking app. Some dude in Texas posts up a grid machine on Offer Up for $800. $800. Now, remember, I paid $1,000 for these two, which was a steal. So that's about a little over $500 each. It was $1,025. Then you got to figure the shipping was like $700 to bring these both two here. So that's what I paid for these, right? I find my third machine. So now I find this in, I forget the fucking date, March 14th, 2021. That's when I find the one from Texas on Offer Up. There's only one weird thing about it. It's got a single topper, just like my other two. The one in Fun and Games was a triple topper. Triple topper means that there's 3 cabinets, but then there's one big topper that connects all 3, which is pretty rare. Usually you see them with the singles. So the 2 that I had were single toppers, and then the 3rd one I got was there, but the sides were painted black. So now when I first saw the pictures, I thought the artwork was removed. So I'm thinking to myself, whatever, I'll just put it in the middle and put the other 2 I have on the outside. But now, remember, I don't know much about arcade machines, so I don't know what's normal practice for these things. But this guy I bought him off of, I believe his name was Dan, he tells me the original artwork is probably underneath. That arcade operators sometimes would paint the sides of machines all the time with just regular paint. And there's a way, if you do it carefully, you can remove the art. He's like, but I don't have enough time to do it. You want to buy it for $800, take it, and then you could try it. There's a product called Citrus Strip. It's this orange gooky pasty shit, like a cake paste. You use that, figure out, watch a YouTube video on how to do it, and then you'll be able to remove it. So I'm like, whatever, I'll try it. So he brings it here, and not only does it work, I document this whole process on my Instagram, and I'll throw, for those viewing, I'll throw some videos up there now. What you do is you get the citrus strip and you brush it on with a brush. It's kind of like it's like this orange slime, not slime, but like, it's this weird thick. It's like glue almost. You brush it on the side where the paint is, let it sit for a little bit, and then you scrape it off. And that's what I did. I brushed it on carefully, did one section at a time, and let me tell you something. The art underneath this thing was like brand fucking new. It was like it was never untouched because it was probably painted over as soon as they got it. So I was able to resurrect this thing, learn about more arcade stuff that I never know about, that people normal practice to paint on the sides. And this is the way to get it off. And, you know, I was able to resurrect and restore this piece. And then there I got my 3. But there's one thing missing. I want that triple topper. I want it because it has a presence. I remember when I was at Fun and Games and I walked in there and saw it and just see that topper connected across all 3 machines. I fucking needed it. There's no way I can't have it. I need that. So that's when I really started my first negotiation with John Chimento. So I hit up John and I start telling him, listen, I need the triple topper. So this is all, mind you, this is all within like 3 months' time. You know, by the time Dan comes in the first time and the second time. So I get it in March. I get this shit. Tell him, do that, blah, blah. He makes a deal with me to buy the triple topper, but he wants $1,000 for the fucking triple topper. So whatever, what am I going to do? You're never going to find a triple topper anywhere unless you fabricate it yourself, and that's a rabbit hole you don't want to go down. You need a machinist, metal, fabricator, whatever. So he sells it to me. So I bring it up here, and there it goes. I replace all new halogen bulbs. I figure out how to connect this thing via the manual I already had previously. Boom, 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 boom. And I put the triple topper on it. Now I'm fucking ready. Now I am ready, and I'm losing my fucking mind at this point. I'm like, I can't believe I finally have it. I mean, I sat there. There was times when I came in here and I had those 3 and I would just turn them on and I would stare. Just stare at it like, I wish my mother was here to see this. She knew how much I love this game. Like, I never thought in a million years that I'd be able to not only play this game again, but to create an environment where not only my friends could enjoy this game, but we'd never have to worry about not playing this game ever again. And we'd be able to relive our moments, our nostalgic childhood where we all felt happy, where, you know, that moment in time where we felt safe. You know, Fun and Games was our safe space. And the fact that I was able to do that for us in the beginning, it was magical. I can't even describe to you what that, to finally, through all these years, make it happen. It was fucking magical. Before I decide to get my friends, I got this all done by like basically April, right, of 2021. And before I decide to invite my friends over and really tell them I'm ready. I got 3. There's one thing that I had to do on these things, and it's the centering grommets on the joystick. I replaced all the track balls because those are easy to buy. They're like $100 each. I replaced all the track balls. I figured out a way to get new keypads, got brand new keypads because there's not, parts aren't easy to find for this shit. I've hoarded the parts now, but at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. It was tough. It's the centering grommet. Now, what the centering grommet is when you have a joystick and you pull it in one direction, you let it go, and it comes back to center. That's why it's called a centering grommet. It's essentially like this metal and rubber piece that the joystick is in, and it creates elasticity so you can move it around. Obviously, there's an optical board underneath it, which is basically a little miniature PCB board, and that electronically will control, on the screen where the stuff goes, connected, whatever, all that stuff. But the grid, since when it came out, it was so unique. Even the control panels and stuff are very unique to that machine. So a lot of the stuff that was made for it is custom to it. Now, the centering grommets, you can't just buy the optical board that these joysticks use are the same ones that are used in Blitz and NBA Jam and stuff. It's a 49-way optical board. But the centering grommet is not the same. The centering grommet on those machines is very small. This one, it's different. So you got the grid joystick with the trigger and the Jumpman. Underneath, you can't see, there's this metal rod that goes underneath into the actual, the control panel underneath, the area that you can't see. And on the bottom of it, there's 2 metal pieces that comes out of the joystick. So that sits in a slot to make it able to move it around without turning it. So the centering grommet, normally on most machines, is just a fucking circle that the pin would go through, the shaft rather. This one is slotted so that it doesn't spin, so that you can maintain that same forward shape of it and move it around and be able to play. So that's an entire rabbit hole I went down. I didn't want to have any friends over without having fresh centering grommets in all 3 of these. I wanted to completely rebuild the joystick. And the reason why is because I remember when I was a kid and I was playing at the fun and games, there was nothing better than when the machine got repaired, and you could know when the joystick got repaired because those in those arcade days, these machines were played heavy, so they were beat up, so they would constantly have to rebuild shit. And I knew when Rich would put a brand new centering grommet in these fucking things because it felt not super tight, but it was tight and it was nice and elastic. But the issue is, since this was so custom, I go online, show pictures of the centering grommet, trying to figure out where it's from. Luckily, the arcade community is so helpful. They tell me the centering grommets are actually called plateform mounts, and they're from a company called Lord who makes airplane control pilot fucking joystick centering grommets. So this company, you can't just go on their website and buy, because it requires an LLC and this and that. These are basically fucking airplane parts for their control stands. So now, luckily, I have an LLC because of Pinhead Co. So now I can contact this company, use my LLC, get a distributor, and they'll sell them to me. So they end up selling me this shit, but there's only one problem. There's a unique custom slot that is machined into the center of it so that it could fit with the grid, and then it's mounted on like a diamond. Instead of like this, it's mounted this way, so the slot sticks in that way. So I had to find a machinist, and I found this guy in basically North Bergen who sat there and charged me $20 each centering grommet just to machine in this slot. But I wasn't doing it for one. I ended up doing it for like 20 of them. And I fucking kept 12 for myself because I hoard parts for this game so I can keep these running forever. And then I sold some to my friend Dan in Chicago. But that was a crazy rabbit hole that I had to go down to get these things fixed. But I get them fixed, and I was able to call my friends and have my first Grid Fest. And when was it? It was in May 21st of 2021. And it was incredible, man. being able to call my old friends, Shauno, J Palm, James, Alex, aka Russia, all these guys. And in the beginning, there was only like 7 people in here. Now, not only did I have my 3 set here, I had my, at that time I acquired some other arcade machines. So I got a Dance Dance Revolution. I had a fucking House of the Dead, and I had something else. I had a punching machine. So to be able to have them here was remarkable. It was fucking amazing, man. To just see them all playing that game, creating their names again like it was in high school. It changed my life, that moment. That moment fucking changed my life forever. But that was May 21st is what started it all. And that's when everything kind of just, it took off from there. And then, the next month in June is when I did Gridfest 2.0. And then, then it started to snowball. After I did 2.0, I actually made a flyer for that one. And then things started to just really get out of hand. And then more people came the next time. So I went from 7 to let's say 15. And then, I would always post in my stories and document all this shit. So it kind of, it went kind of nutty for a minute. So during this time, Dan was getting ready to come back to pick up his 6. Now I had 3 at this time. Got the triple topper from John. I never imagined I would have 6. But Dan starts planting seeds in my head. He's like, listen, man. He's like, you need 6, bro. How are you not going to have 6? You're like the grid god. How are you not going to have fucking 6 cabinets? And I'm like, I at first I thought he was crazy, but then I'm like, I think you're right. And at this point, I ended up getting a Cruisin' USA double set with the rare double topper that would connect them both. And I had that where my other 3 set of the grid is right now. So I knew I have to get rid of that then if I'm gonna get that. But I'm like, wait, should I do it? How do I have the money? I was kind of freaking out, but I knew Dan was coming back that July or the end of June or whatever. So I was like, I got to make a decision. And then I knew I would have to pay more for them. I knew I would have to pay a couple grand a pop because, the popularity started to raise with them because of my posting all the time. And I was like, man, I'm going to have to do this soon. So Dan ended up convincing me that I needed some more. So I ended up talking to John. I negotiate with him. The only problem is since Dan made the deal first, he got first pick. So I wanted to make this special. And since I did my first event May, did my second one in June, I wanted to do a Gridfest 3.0 in July because 3.0 with 3 more machines, it was just it was magic. It was serendipitous. So I was like, I gotta do that. So I don't know how I did it, but he comes down. I go down with him, and that was the legendary documented grid pick of the century. And I posted it on Twitter because at the same time all this is going on, I have Pinhead Co., like I told you, and I made a Twitter for Pinhead Co. I hate Twitter, but I made a Twitter for Pinhead Co. And I ended up converting it into not even posting Pinhead Co. stuff. I would only post grid stuff because I found out that Ed Boon was on Twitter, and I knew he would love if I started posting this shit. So at the same time, as this is going on, as my first party launches leading up to 3.0, I'm posting grid shit heavy. I'm tagging him all the time, and he's not seeing it. I'm tagging him grid. But then other people on Twitter are catching notice to it and reposting my shit, and it's starting to get a little wild. So as I'm building this community on there, prior to me getting my other 3, I feel like it's coming close. I'm like, yo, Ed's going to see my shit one day, and he's going to be blown away because something new in the back of my mind that Ed loves the grid. And at the same time that I'm talking to him, I'm getting in communication with other developers, Alan Villainy, Todd, Ed's brother, Mike, and I'm starting to get in contact with all these developers because there's a lot of questions that I need. And as I mentioned earlier, the badge thing that I had, there was a lot of questions growing up that I wanted to know about when I played the grid. And who am I going to ask? nobody knew the specific questions that I had. Like I found a grid glitch when you could put the bomb on your back. And I ended up finding through Mike later on that when you get the grid, the bomb is attached to a bone in the hand in the polygon. So when he raises his hand, that's why it's up there. But I discovered and exploited a glitch that I could repeat all the time is when you're about to get the bomb. And if you know you're about to grab the last piece of money to get the bomb, that if you have a continuous fire weapon and you hold the fire button, when you're going to get it, it'll put the bomb on your back. So there was a lot of questions like that I wanted to know, that I needed to know. And the only person I could ask were people that developed the game. So luckily I was able to get in touch with Mike Boone. And if anybody at NetherRealm, everybody knows that Mike Boone is the glue that holds NetherRealm together. Whatever games they come out with, this guy is the glue. He's the one that really finalizes everything and just keeps everything together. But he's not one of those guys that wants to be in the press and all that. So luckily, I was able to contact with him early on during this time, amongst other developers. And Mike Boone was so helpful. All the questions that I've had over 20 years, he was able to answer all of them for me. And that was, one of the ones that he wanted to answer to me. So anyway, the Twitter's getting crazy. He's coming there. We're doing all that stuff. I document this legendary pick. You see all this stuff there. I negotiate. He sells me those 3 machines. We have Dan's aside, and I bring them here, and I get them ready for July of 2021, and that's when Gridfest 3.0 happens, and that was the craziest one yet. And that's also when Ed Boon finally saw my shit and discovered me, because I started making other crazy merch around this time. I'm going to explain later all the merch that I made regarding the game, because there's too much, the timeline spread out too far out. But this is when I made the Gobo projector. If anybody knows what a Gobo projector is, picture me putting a Batman symbol like on the side of my barn. That's basically what I did. But it was a full color Gobo projector cell that projected the grid logo on the side of my barn. So that was the first time I did that. And that's when I had my biggest grid party yet, was 3.0. And then even more people came. It was like 40 something or 50. And that's when this thing started to fucking go crazy. I took a break in August. And then September, I did Gridfest 4.0, which was probably, the biggest one yet. And that was when I realized these grid parties started getting a little too crazy. They were getting funky. I'm starting to provide food, drinks, and stuff. And it got to a level where there were so many people coming that there's no way I could do this every month, because obviously it was a trend. I did it in May, June, July, and in September. So I made a conscious decision to start doing, okay, if I'm going to keep doing this every month has to be something called grid sessions, where it's kind of like poker night, where you come over, 15 guys playing the grid, real hardcore grid players, hang out by the fire pit, just chill, but not like on such a grand scale. And then every August, I'll do Grid Fest. So 4.0 in September of 2021 was the last Grid Fest that was going on every month. And every year after that, in August, is when Grid Fest, and all during the year is grid sessions. Of course, until I hit October of 2023, because in 2022, I started in October of 2024 is when I stopped the monthly ones, because in October 2023, I started my own podcast called the Sauce Talk Podcast, which obviously you're here right now listening to. And this is, as you can see in this bird's eye view right here, is my arcade doubles as a podcast studio, which I break down and move out of here when I have my arcade parties. But it got to a point in 2023, once I started doing video, it was too much. 2024 rather, that I started doing video was too much. So I started in 2023, did it a whole year. And then in 2024, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do video. And it got too fucking crazy. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to, once I start the video in October 2024, my first episode was with Ari Sale Foreman. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to do, every couple months or 3 months. So then that's when I stopped the monthly parties because like it's just too much, man. Look at all this equipment in this view. You can't see most of it, but there's stuff over there. There's so many cables and stuff. There's a lot of moving parts to this podcast to make it possible. And I can't possibly break this down every month. So I had to finish that. It was over and no more, monthly grid sessions. Now it's more like I'd say tri-monthly. And then, every August is the big giant, annual grid fest. But that's kind of like how the story started. And, after I sold all those to John, sold those 4 John to Dan, and then I got my 3. I ended up selling the remaining 4 or 5 to another guy I know. And I got rid of all of John's grid machines for him. And, that was the story. And then after that, after I started posting on the Twitter and all that, Ed Boon started following me, started reposting all my shit. The first thing he kind of reposted was when I got that GoPro projector for 3.0, and I posted a still of my barn with the logo blasted on it. And he posted, I'll never forget it. It said, Gridfest, what is this? Something like that. Like, is this a grid tournament or something? Like, he had no idea. And then, I started posting. So then he starts getting familiar with the shit. And then he ended up starting following me. And then he ended up, helping me later on when I was doing other grid projects. And it just started snowballing, man. It started to get absolutely crazy. The parties were going absolutely bonkers. And I just got to a point where, every time I do something, it just gets bigger and bigger every time. And dude, every year, every grid fest, 80 people, 90 people. And then this last year, it was absolutely absurd. There must have been 125 people here last year. We had an ice cream truck, a food truck. I mean, it was absolutely fucking absurd. So now what was really amazing about it is, like I told you, my main purpose of these parties was to create an environment for my friends so they can not have to ever worry ever again about playing the grid, but to also raise awareness to the game and to keep the game alive because it's such a forgotten game. Nobody really knows about it. The number one question is, what is the grid? I never heard of it. So that was like another main goal of mine. And the fact that I was able to, help it and make that possible was absolutely everything to me. But included with that, what came with that was making a lot of merch. And every party I would have something new merch that I would come out with and present to my guests or my friends or sell online or just one-offs for me. So I'm going to bring back the merch talk and I'm going to list off and explain, during all these years that I've been making this stuff, what merch I made. And since I've been making all this stuff and became friends with Ed and all these guys, Ed Boon has every piece of merch that I've ever fucking made. Besides the one-off stuff that I obviously can't ship him because it's a one-off. But he's got everything I ever made. His brother's got almost everything. Dan Forden, the audio guy, Toasty, he's got it. Alan Villainy, Todd, all these guys, they have a lot of shit. So right now I'm going to talk about all the grid stuff that I did and I'll rattle it off. So the first grid merch that I ever made for the game when I got down my over-obsessive rabbit hole were the logo pins. That was the first thing that I ever did. Then after that, as I mentioned earlier, on the gridgame.com website, there was this cool picture that it was called Got Grid. It was basically Wes, the main character / quote unquote mascot of the grid. And he had like this pistachio green, or I call it grid green mustache. And it says Got Grid, kind of like the Got Milk ad. So I made stickers and a t-shirt of that logo. Then I made t-shirts like the one I'm wearing of the old grid promo t-shirt because I didn't want to ruin my actual real one. So this is what I'm wearing. It's almost the same thing, literally almost like word for word. I made a Got Grid t-shirt. I made embroidered grid crew neck sweatshirts embroidered on the back and the front. It's got the big grid logo on the front with the small grid MLB style logo on the back by the neck collar. Ed Boon has those. I made these grid socks, which were fire. It's basically got the grid pattern on the back, and then it's got 3 heads on it with the grid MLB style logo. It's got the host, it's got Gridman, and it's got Wes. And then I made grid lighters, And I handed the grid socks and the grid lighters out because I have one of those punching machines. And when people hit them, I would, whoever would beat the high score, I would give them free gifts. And even inside here, like I'd randomly come in, and when people are playing on the 6 machines, I'd randomly pop in and be like, whoever gets first place this round gets a free lighter or gets free socks. Like that was like what I did. It was so fun to me. So that was like one of the main things that I was doing with that. I also made balloons, grid balloons that I designed, and those were hanging up for the first couple parties. I stopped doing it because it was a pain in the ass to buy the helium, and I just didn't want to make balloons, but I did those. I did the custom bar stools that people use here every day. Got those made actually in Chicago. Those were made in Chicago and shipped here. And one of the best things I made was, it was called the grid coin. Now, this kind of brings back the culture of, remember I was telling you, the put your quarter up, era, and that whole time frame. So I made these basically challenge coins to bring that whole culture, to fruition. I wanted to make a grid challenge coin that would have a personalized name engraved on it. So I'll throw up pictures of that for those of you watching. It's basically like an enlarged version of a U.S. coin currency, kind of with the same lettering and stuff, which took me hard to find. But it's got a 3D embossed Wes logo on it. Instead of a president, it's got Wes on it. And then on the back, it has the old Midway office address on it. It's got the grid logo and stuff. But then it's got a section where it has the grid name engraved on it. So the picture that I'm showing is my old name, Chaos. But the whole point of me to make that grid coin was to show my friends. It was a token of my appreciation, to show everybody that I love, that I grew up playing the grid with. I wanted to show them my appreciation for them, and I wanted them to feel special and to remember the simpler times that we had at Funny Games playing the game. So now, the other ideology behind it was like, you have your own. Remember I told you, you'd put your quarter up, but nobody knew. Nobody had their name on their quarter. So this was kind of like a play on that put your quarter up era, where you put it up and you know whose it is because your name is etched in it. But it was more of something like a personal keepsake, just so people could have something that was the grid and that had their actual name that they used in it. So now all the developers that I told you, that I mentioned before, they have their coins with their name on it. Friends I made, and all my OG friends that came here, but I made some extra that were blank. And the reason I did that was because I was trying to build a grid community, as I told you guys earlier. I don't want just my friends to come here that I played with growing up. People love the grid and they see it and they want to play it, but they have nowhere to play it. So I can't tell you how many people played this game for the first time here in my house. Not only in my house, but the first time my friends growing up and anybody else got to see what it was like to play on 6 machines. So the fact that I was be able to make that possible just made everything worthwhile. But what was really cool is this newer community that started building here. And to be honest, these newer guys that I met online from the fighting game Mortal Kombat community that come here now every month when I do this shit, I love these guys. I mean, I'm talking about Henry, his brother Miguel. I mean, everybody, Mikey, Metroid, Catterman, Halverson, B.O.B., Icy. Like, there's so many people that come, Costner, there's so many people that come here now that weren't coming here when I first did it. They came like a year or two later. And these guys weren't even really playing grid back in the day. And now they're becoming high-level fucking players. That stuff to me it's everything to me. I mean, this is what I did this shit for. I did this shit so we could keep this community alive and build a newer community. And that's like what keeps this place thriving, is actually the newer guys that found a new love with this game because of what I've been doing. And, you know, I've made coins. The reason why I bring that up is because I've made coins, the blank ones, after I saw them coming here and really putting in that work. My buddy Shaggy owns his own personal jewelry business and he has a laser etching. So he etched and lasered those extra ones out there. And I have a couple more blank ones. So there's some of you out there, if you're going to come here and put in that work, you might have your own coin one day. So we'll see. But that was one of my favorite things that I've ever done. The best thing to me that I've ever done was the grid plushies. Now, there's a code in the grid called Grid Kids. You type in this code, it makes your head big, your hands big, and your feet big. But I kind of coined that term to be something of a remembrance of us hanging out. I call us grid kids, us coming up, playing the grid, having a good time. So I made that, and it wouldn't have been possible without Ed Boon and without Dan Forden, the audio guy over at Midway, also known as NetherRealms now. Shout out to my guy at Little Devils Club. I collaborated with him, and he was able to design the full turnarounds because I wanted to make the grid characters from the game look like little kids, kind of like that Japanese culture stuff. So I wanted to make them a little smaller, so I hired him to do the little turnarounds because he has a real high appreciation for Japanese culture, and he was able to make them, absolutely unreal. I forget the name of the the style of Japanese when they make things smaller and look really kiddish. I forget the fucking name of him. Not kawaii, but I forget the name. Something else. It's drawing a blank right now. But he helped me make the turnarounds for them, and then I needed some sounds because I wanted to make the host say stuff, and I wanted to make the bomb characters say the bomb, but I needed actual audio from the game. So I reached out to Ed Boon first, and he was able to help me give me the bomb. Actually, I have that noise right here. I got that from Ed Boon, and I wanted to make the host say multiple things, and he says 9 things. So I needed some more audio. So I was able to get in touch with Dan Forden, who's the audio guy for Midway and made all the Mortal Kombat audio and all that stuff, as well as NetherRealm Studios. And he's also the guy Toasty. That's the head that pops out. That's Dan Forden, who's actually retiring in 2 weeks. I love you, Dan. I wish you the best in your in your retirement life, and your contribution to the video game culture is absolutely unmatched. But I reached out to him, and he was able to help me get some other sounds. I was going to ask Ed again, but he's a very busy guy. I didn't want to bother him. So Dan was able to help me get all the sounds for the rest of the plushies that I needed. And besides that, and my man helping me for the turnarounds, and then me dealing with the factory. I mean, this was a project that cost me thousands of fucking dollars. Thousands of dollars. And I barely made my money back. Not even like way under my money back. But what are you going to do? I took a hit, but I created something, and I created toys that my son could actually play with. And I did a commercial for this. And I'll show you the commercial now for those that are watching. You're going to get to see the commercial. For those listening, you'll get to hear it, which is not the best. I recommend you watch this podcast, but for now, you're all going to watch it. So here's the Grid Kids plushie commercial, which is available on YouTube, but I figure I might as well include this here. So here it is.
The master has the bomb! And that's all she wrote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. It's time to play the grid.
The all-new Grid Kids plushie toys for all ages. Wes has a posable helmet mic.
Now that wasn't very nice.
Karasu has a removable sword. Gridfest exclusive Blue Karasu Chase variant. Bash them together for fun.
Me!
Talking host says 8 unique phrases. Comes with microphone accessory. Press foot to activate.
Good luck! Booyah! That was fun! And remember, folks, it's not real!
And many more!
The bomb!
Equipped with Da Bomb sound effects. Press collar to activate. Grid Kids plushie toys brought to you by Pinhead Co. and Knucklehead Toys. Collect them all!
Midway assumes no liability for injuries, dismemberment, or hurt feelings inflicted upon any contestants or audience members during the taping of the grid. That's what you get.
So that was the Grid plushies video. I worked a lot on that fucking commercial. I had my son Maximus. I love you, Maximus, so much. That was one of the most fun projects I've ever done. It was well worth the debt I climbed into to make that. And, you know, after I made that, he got to play with those toys. And, you know, to see other people enjoy those toys as much as I did it just brought a smile to my face. And like I told you before, like the Grid never came out on consoles. It never was able to flourish in the way that I thought it deserved. So to be able to create an environment that I want to live in, I want to thrive in, to be able to make toys and merchandise in honor of the game and celebration of it. I mean, it means the world to me. And that's why I got so over obsessive with it. And I couldn't stop. I mean, you know, after I made those, I made more Grid pins, but I made, there's a level in the Grid called Staying Alive. It's a very disco style level. And on the wall, there's like a psychedelic Grid logo, and at the dot of the eye is a disco ball. So I wanted to make a pin of that. So I was able to actually do that. And I instead of a disco ball, I was able to get some sort of like mirrored stone to resemble it. And, you know, I'll show you in pictures. This pin to me was like everything. And that was a lot of fun to work at. And then one of my Grid parties was revolved around my birthday. And my wife is the fucking greatest ever. And she had somebody make me a custom Da Bomb birthday cake. And this thing was not only the biggest surprise, it was one of the most delicious things that I've ever met in my fucking life. Thank you so much to my wife. Besides that, I the hand tufted rug phase was getting pretty crazy. So another idea, I'm like, sure, let me get a custom Grid one for my console room in the house, the entertainment room. Made one of those, and that was another thing that I fucking made that was phenomenal. Besides that, I made something that was incredible. Now, if you remember, I told you I made the Fun and Games diorama using that guy, but I originally wanted to use a guy named Ryan Monahan. What the hell? So this was the project that I figured I had to use him for. And I didn't really show people this. So this is kind of like a world premiere until I make the video that I want to displaying it. I commissioned him to make, remember I told you the Grid single player has these towers similar to the Mortal Kombat towers, and there's 10 towers. But when you play the Grid, most people don't even get to play the single player if you're playing this in the wild, because everybody's playing the multiplayer. You're never going to be there by yourself to play the single player. So the only tower that most people see is the first one, because they might get a couple of rounds and then they got to play multiplayer again. A new challenger comes in, and it's the green tower, the first tower. So I wanted to replicate that in a diorama form and make that for a personal one-of-one, piece to my collection. So I commissioned Ryan, and he did it for me. It's got the lights that scroll on the side. I even had a custom-made the people that made the same sound box for my plushies, I had to make me another custom box, that played Grid music and shit to put in this. So I had it made. I sent it to Ryan. He put it in this. So now the tower makes noises and plays sounds too. And I'll show you some of those videos up there. It's pretty fucking wild, but it's an amazing, amazing piece, and he knocked it out of the park. I mean, I picked the color of the paint and everything. It was a great collaborative effort. Mike Boone helped me get some of the pictures for the towers, for the levels and everything. It was just so good. Another thing that I made that was amazing, that even Ed really liked, was the Grid ring. So I made a ring that obviously Wes is the mascot to the game. So it's like very iconic head and stuff. So I made this ring that basically was Wes's head. It even had like the clear red for the visor eyes and the fucking, posable microphone. And it says, that's what you get embroidered like underneath the ring. It's a wonderful fucking ring with the Grid logos on the side. And I only made a few. I made one for me, one for my wife, and some random sizes, and Ed got one of them. But I made one for my cousin Louie. I didn't make too many of those. Those were never for sale. This was like a friends and family thing, but when I got over obsessive, Then after that, I made something even crazier. For the outside of my arcade, I discovered this guy that runs a company called Infinity Signs in Little Falls. And he makes these wonderful, wonderful signs for businesses and, any sort of retail environment. So I was like, you know what? I want a sign for my arcade, but I want it to be the Grid logo. But instead of it saying the Grid, I want it to say the Alcade, because my name's Al, short for Albert. And the nickname we have for this arcade that I think was actually, I put a post on my Instagram a long time ago, and I said, if you could name an arcade, what would you name it? And Jerry named it the Alcade, and it kind of made the most sense. So thank you to Jerry, to my dick, I ended up naming it the Alcade. So I had my guy, Phil Guy, Burrito Breath, again, design something else for me. And he basically was able to flip the Grid letters and make it say Alcade. And then I got like vectors from the tower guy. Like I had all these pieces together to make this thing. And I worked with this guy to make this thing for me. And it's the most amazing entrance to my arcade of all time. And one of my favorite projects to date. And it was pretty fair price. It was a little pretty penny, but it's got such a presence to it when you enter here that it's like unbelievable. And the last thing I did, second to last thing I did was I still haven't, these are one of ones for me, but I plan on making them to release to the public in some form, in some way. So the Grid never came out on consoles. So I wanted to reimagine if the Grid ever did. So I got 2 artists design Grid covers for me. I had one digital artist from Portugal who's amazing do something for me that was done purely digitally painted to look more modern. And then I had another artist. I met this guy named Roger Lovelace. Now he's done, the way they did video game covers years ago was they would hand paint them, right? And that's something that it's removed from today's video game covers, and it's got such a special feeling to it. I wanted to capture that. So I was watching this documentary one day. It's like a show documentary called Video Game Box Art. And it basically has interviews and stuff with the original guys that painted a lot of these covers, like Dubois and this guy Roger Lovelace and stuff like that. So I ended up contacting the director. He put me in contact with one of the guys. And the reason why Roger Lovelace stuck out to me, he did a lot of stuff for Sega CD, Super Nintendo, Bionic Commando, stuff like that. He did a lot of great covers for these old video games, as well as like novels and stuff like that, and D&D game guides and shit. This guy was so good that the way he painted explosions to me, it just stuck out. And I was like, you know what? This is the type of guy that I need to do this retro artwork from. But now, even though I had the digital artwork done for the digital newer style, I wanted to do an older style retro. This stuff's hand painted, is expensive. So this cost me a shit ton of money. This is one of the most expensive projects I ever had, was having Roger do a Grid painting for me. And he was on board. He was all for it. But at the same time, he was a little sick. He was, he had some health issues he had going on. So I had to be patient with him. But nevertheless, it ended up working out. And he did this wonderful painting for me, this retro style hand-painted Grid cover. So the whole point was I wanted to one day come out with posters, old versus new, and to create artwork that never was. Since the Grid never came out, I was reimagining, if they ever did come out on consoles, what it would look like if it came out years ago and what it would look like if it came out now. So I had the digital artwork for the newer stuff and the retro guy for the retro. But the crazy thing was the frame job that I had to get the original painting put in. It's absolutely bonkers. It cost me like a fucking third of the painting. It was insane. But I was able to have this beautiful black frame and a shadow box, elevate the painting like an inch or so above the backing, and then, to resemble the piping on the Grid. You know how the Grid has this this green T molding, like I was telling you before. The frame actually has that green piping down the edges, so it kind of resembles the the arcade cabinet. And then since it's a deep shadow box, this special framing place, shout out to these guys in Montclair, they were able to do the grid pattern on the inner walls of the shadow box. It was absolutely fucking absurd. And it came out wonderful. And I plan on doing either posters or puzzles with the artwork on it. I haven't done it yet. But I did one last grid project that I haven't even really showed much either. It's just, I'm so damn busy. I never have time to do any of this shit. I plan on making all these videos showcasing all this stuff. But I did wearable grid helmets. So I did Wes and I did Karasu. And shout out to my boy from Mexico that helped make this happen. The language barrier again was there, but it came out absolutely fucking magical. This guy killed it. These helmets are unbelievable. I've never cosplayed in my life, but now I actually can with these. And you know, I'm just so happy, man. This is like one of the best things that I could have ever done. And that's a lot of merch to make, like within that small period of time. And you know, it's hard to keep. I wanted to keep this podcast like an hour long, but it's kind of impossible because I did so much during all these times. And I want to answer you all the questions you've all had for me. And I just want to get it out of there so you have a directory to go read it, listen to it, and then you're fucking done forever and you're good. So there you go. That's basically my grid story from beginning to end. And I know it was a lot, but I just wanted to share it all for you. And I want you all to understand my love that I have not only for the game, but for the culture in general. And just, you know, I mean, to be honest, I'm living out my dreams. When it comes to this stuff, I'm so happy to create an environment where everybody can come. I mean, if you ever come to my grid fest that I do every year, the big one, 80% of the people don't even play the grid. But the fact that I can get all these people together in the name of the grid, I mean, it means the world to me. And the fact that I can bring on new fans of the grid from that point forth, and we could just all celebrate everything in the name of the grid means the world to me. And, you know, it's every year gets bigger and bigger. Grid Fest this last August was insane. It was like 100 and something. It must have been 125 people in the backyard. Grid logo blasted. Grid. It's just, this all would have never happened if it wasn't for my love for this game and you know, just trying to relive my childhood. And, you know, obviously the game means a lot to me, but I don't know, maybe I'm also holding on to the time that I enjoyed the game, you know? Maybe it reminds me a lot of my mother. That's probably the case, you know? I'm just trying to hold on to every memory I have of her and to celebrate it. So for sure, without my mother, you know, nothing's possible at all. But, you know, without my fans, friends, my supporters, you know, thanks to you guys, you know, we get to all be happy together. And one of the best compliments that I've ever gotten was from my friend Matthew Welty. You all probably know him from Complex Magazine and the Complex Sneaker Podcast and stuff. He said to me, when I come to Gridfest, I feel like I'm in the movie Garden State. And that was like the greatest compliment that anybody could ever give to me, because that's what Gridfest essentially is. It's an accumulation of 39 years of my life. All the people that I've ever met from all walks of life, just all with a mutual respect for each other and a love for each other. And people come here, there's hoodlums, there's goths, there's gays, there's straight people. It's a melting pot for all sorts of demographics. And more importantly, everybody is respectful and everybody gets along. And there's nothing more that I could ask for, you know, than that. And it all came together because of the grid. It's the most amazing, most magical environment and community that I was able to build here for you all to enjoy. And, you know, I thank you all so much. And one thing is that I really want to give a special shout out to my wife, Bethsaida Lynn Moschetti, and you all know her as Lynn. None of this is really possible, obviously, without my mother, as I really expressed. None of this is possible without my father. But really, Lynn, Lynn, even though she's not into all the stuff that I'm into, she supports all the stuff that I'm into. And, without her by my side, without my wife's support for all the things I do, with all the things that I put her through, because the one thing that my friends always say to me is like, your wife's cool with all that shit. And the first answer I tell them is, I wouldn't have married her if she wasn't, which is true. But it's not even that. It's that she puts up with a lot. She puts up with so much. She's my rock. She's absolutely my world in every sense of the word. And, I'm very thankful to have crossed paths with my wife, and literally just being in her presence motivates me to create. It motivates me to be a better me. She's really, I'm trying not to cry, but my wife is very special to me. Very. And none of this would be possible without her. 110%. So I really want to just give a shout out to my wife for being my rock and being there by my side through all this and all the pain and chaos. And she's, if she wasn't there, none of this would happen. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for sitting through this long story. But I hope I answered your fucking question. And more importantly, get your fucking grid on. So that was the grid and me. And I love you all. Have a good one.